Mapalad Critical Habitat and Ecotourism Area. SBM Chea is a mangrove islet found in the heart of Sasmuan, Pampanga. It is within the large enclosed sea of Manila Bay. Why SBM Chea is considered as one of the bird's migrating point in Central Luzon.
5 years, mention natin yung mga maraming migratory bird sa
SBM Chea is one of the migratory birds' favorite because of its serenity and abundance in food resources. SBM Chea hosts more than 50 species of migratory birds from various wintering countries like Russia, Japan, New Zealand, and China. There are approximately 30,000 to 40,000 migratory birds that visit the area from November to March the following year. Locals in Sasmuan, Pampanga consider SBM Chea as a gift because of the benefit they get from it.
Tulad sa amin, dyan lahat ng gagaling yung kinakain namin, yung mga kabuhayan, sa iyo, yung mga isda, ang gano'n ng pinitita, sa mga palaisdaan. Silang ganti, palagaan natin. Dahil dyan tayo namin
Nakita namin yung
of the river that can help to protect the river.
we are working together as one. Para ma-protektahan, mapamalagan, malaman, mamamayan, meron pa rin ganun. Kasi isa sa mga inaasahan namin yung magpapaubod sa bayan.
Yung mga activities na ginagawa namin, yung mga pinaproject namin sa kailugan, para mabawasan kahit kunti lang yung mga basura, pinapangalagaan na yung ilog. Dahil dyan sila kumukuha ng pagkain sa Mangrove.
There is so much to be done for SBM Chea. The DENR and local communities is continuously finding ways to preserve it and ensure migratory birds will still find a home in it.
Hindi lang ito para sa mga ibon, kundi para din sa tao. Dahil magkakaugnay ang bawat nilalang. May pakinabang ang tao, may pakinabang ang ibon, may pakinabang ang halaman, at tayong lahat ay kumbaga nakikinabang sa nilalang.
SBM Chea is a haven to enjoy, not just for the present, but also for the future generations in Pampanga.
So get this, every 1.07 seconds, a new user goes to Wix.com and starts creating their professional website. That's 80,000 go-getters joining every day. They're already growing their
Okay, everyone. Good afternoon, good day, mabuhay from Philippines, and may pagkatanapon from Pampanga. Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Salenga, your moderator for today, and welcome to the World Mangrove Day 2020 Mangrove for Coastal Defense webinar. Before we go further, I just want to remind you that we are on live streaming at SBN Chea web page of Sasmuan, Bangkong Walapat Critical Habitat and Ecotourism area. So before we go further, I want to remind some house rules in this webinar. So you might see the screen first. So a reminder, to all the participants of the webinar, please, for the attendance purposes, kindly type in the chat box your name, office, and designation. Thank you. Your active participation is important throughout the session. Right now, I have with me with the team and the personnel of the Wetlands International to assist us. Right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid background noises that might distract you from listening to the webinar. Throughout the presentation, someone on staff will be managing the chat functionality. You may share your comments and questions in the question box throughout the presentation. We will collect these, address them after the presentation. We will now proceed to our program. But before, let's hear now the welcome greetings of our partner government agency, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the Proactive Provincial Environment and Natural Resource Officer, LAUDEMIR SALAC. Sir. I think sir is in the line.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Am I clear now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So good afternoon to everyone, to all the participants in this webinar. Purposely in celebration on the International Day on conservation of the mangrove ecosystem. And we'd like to thank our partner, of course, and a very strong collaboration between the national government and the local government unit, especially of Sasmuan, through the leadership of my friend, Mayor Nardo Velasco, to Jason, who's been untiringly working to make this webinar to push through, to our partner, Wetland International, to my colleagues at Penro Pampanga, isang makakalikasan at magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Indeed, we are happy to be part of this very historical undertaking being done. Of course, we all know that this is part of the new normal. We are now in the COVID-19 pandemic, but somehow this does not prevent us for again pursuing our advocacy in the conservation of the mangrove, not only in the municipality of Sasmuan, but in the province of Pampanga and throughout the country. So again, mabuhay po tayong lahat at let's now begin and welcome to you all. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Penro, for the wonderful greetings. For now, for all participants of the webinar, we would want you to test your participation by answering the two poll question, flash in the screen and click the link posted in the chat box. Okay, I need to flash first. The first poll question goes. Here's the first poll question. Do you think your coastal zone is currently at risk? Okay. And the next poll question will be, what do you think is the importance of mangroves in the coastal areas? Okay, I think you got the two poll questions, and the link is in the chat box. So you might click the link and to answer the poll questions. So I think our presenters are ready and our speakers is ready for their presentation. Our first speakers presently work as an environment and resource officer at the province of Pampanga. He has been working 31 years in service, safeguarding our environment, and a graduate at University of the Philippines, Las Bañas, in a Bachelor of Science in Forestry and Masters in Forestry. Ladies and gentlemen, our friends, our colleagues in Safeguarding Environment, please welcome DENR PENRO Officer LAUDEMIR S. SALAC. Sir.
Okay, good afternoon again. I've seen in the program that I would be the first presenter for today. So can you please, Jason, show to us the presentation? Thank you. So in behalf of DENR PENRO Pampanga, I'd like to present to you the conservation and rehabilitation effort being done by our office for the province of Pampanga from the time that we started and up to now. Thank you. So can you show us the presentation? Okay. Anyway, I have a very just a very few slides. I just would like to inform everyone that I will be focusing on the rehabilitation effort and as well as the management strategy that the DENR PENRO Pampanga has been doing, you know, as part of our programs, projects, and activities. So next slide. Of course, as you can see in the first slide, that would be our icon, the icon. Of course, the proposed Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad critical SBM CHEA, the SBM CHEA, Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad, critical habitat and ecotourism area. So next slide, Jason. So as in the outline of my presentation, I would like to give you a brief background of our effort, and then I would present to you some data on our accomplishments and which we have already undertaken, and also the current programs and projects, as well as some of the issues and concerns that we are trying to address. Of course, in coordination with the local government of Sasmuan and also the provincial government of Pampanga, as well as other concerned government agency. So next slide, please. I would like to start, of course, again, as I've been showing an overview, a top view of the, of course, our icon in this mangrove webinar and what in observance of the mangrove day and the National Mangrove Day. This is the proposed SBM chair. So next slide. So I just would like to show you the location map of the province of Pampanga. Of course, probably most of us here in the participants knows that there are 22 local government units comprising 19 municipalities and 3 cities. You know? And what are those 3 cities? This is San Fernando, Mabalacat, and Angeles City. And Angeles is the highly urbanized city in the province. And we have 3 coastal municipalities for the province. Of course, Lubao, Macabebe, and of course, Sasmuan, sorry. So of course, our host municipality. As you can see in the above, you can see those color blue and red. If it's we have the same color, this represents the river system, and you can see the entire province is a catchment area. No? Being there are 2 major river systems, the Guagua-Pasac River. The Pasac River, by the way, ends in the municipality of Lubao, Sasmuan, and Macabebe. And we also have the Pampanga River, which is on the western part of the province. Transecting from its headwater from as far as Nueva Ecija to Tarlac, down to Bulacan and Pampanga. So we have the sub-river basin, as I said earlier. This is the Pasac River, the Pasig Potrero, and the Porac-Kumain River. So really, the entire province of Pampanga is a river basin, a catchment area, or another word is a watershed area. So next slide, please. Next slide. Sorry. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay. What I would like to show in this slide is as I mentioned. Go back. Okay. So there, the existing mangrove areas, of course, obviously are coming from the 3 municipalities, coastal municipalities, namely Macabebe, Sasmuan, and Lubao. But of course, we are focusing more on our proposed SBM chair, or the Sasmuan Bangko Malapad Critical Habitat and Ecotourism Area under the municipality of Sasmuan, where majority of the existing natural mangrove stand can now be located for the province. So next slide, Jason, please. Sorry, next slide. So, okay, so we're now, can we go back on the other slide, the other one that you showed earlier, the one with the coastal, another one, go back, this one. So I'd like to, what I'd like to show here in this particular slide is the length of the coastal area, of the province. There's a distribution for the Sasmuan is 5 kilometers, Lubao is 4.21, and there's a small islet, 1.27, and Macabebe is 10. So out of the total 190 kilometers stretch of the Manila Bay coastal area, we have the 10% for the province, 10% for the representing 10% of the total for the entire Manila Bay region. For Region 3, of course, 142 kilometers. And the other provinces under the Manila Bay region, coastal area is Bataan, of course, and Bulacan. So we are in the middle. That's what I'd like to show here. Now we also share more or less 20 kilometers of the length of the coastal area for the Manila Bay region. So next slide, please. So we'll now proceed with the rehabilitation effort of DENR. So next slide. Next slide. Okay, so okay, how can we move a little on the right because I could not see the anyway, right side portion of the presentation. Can we make adjustment or else can we somehow because I could not see the last two column of the slides. Okay, for the established, you can see here, this is under the National Greening Program of the Department of Environment. The provincial plan of Pampanga. I think the slide is displayed should be the left side, not with the building. Anyway, it started in 2012, 123.23 hectares. And 2014 is 146 hectares, and 2018 it's 196 hectares. So, of course, the corresponding number of propagules at one by one spacing is 989,012, or the 465.73. Hectares established since the start of the National Greening Program, Mangrove Rehabilitation. Of course, I could see here the species, planted, mostly, of course, probably from the observations of the non-government organizations and other foundations, we also often plant Rhizophora species or the pakawan, either babae or lalaki. But we also plant api-api and bugalon, and also lipa, and also pagatpat, one species. Of course, depending on the zonation pattern of the particular mangrove area. But I must admit that sometimes you also overlook the specific mangrove planting materials depending on the particular site to be planted. But of course, the intention, the objective of the National Greening Program is not only greening, we also into poverty alleviation. So can we, and by the way, we're implementing this in partnership with either people's organization in the area, locally based in the area, as well as the local government units from the barangay level and sometimes with the municipality level. So can we have another slide? Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, so what I've been showing here on the left side, that under the Executive Order number 26, 2011, this is the National Greening Program during the time of then President Benigno Aquino Jr. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not only reforestation per se, greening program, but it's also some poverty reduction by using some funds to be given to the people's organization and local government unit. Of course, food security. This is not only apply to mangrove but also for upland because we are planting fruit trees, especially in community-based management area, CBFM area, community forest management area in the upland. So of course, during the duration of the reforestation program for 3 years, of course, we provide alternative livelihood for the community because I said we infuse funds in payment for its rehabilitation. Of course, it also somehow enhanced it's a climate mitigation strategy and also adaptation because of course probably you have other speakers today who are from the academy or from the scientific community who can probably more explain further on the scientific why is it a climate change mitigation and adaptation, the mangrove rehabilitation. Then Executive Order number 26 has been amended to EO number 193 in 2015, extending the program for another 10 to 20 years. That's, I mean, this program of the DENR will go beyond the administration, the current administration of President Duterte. We are now targeting the rehabilitation of the still mga hindi pa na mangrove which has not been evaluated to be not yung stocking density is not that sufficient. So we're trying to do enrichment planting, maintenance and protections of the other plantations. So next slide, please. Next slide. So I'd just like to show here, we are, as I said earlier, we are planting Rhizopora species. Of course, this is the easiest planting material that you can get anywhere. It's easily can be planted, and to the right of the slides, you can see the people's organization and the local government unit also do nursery. They're also raising the propagules in a plastic bags. So that's a good strategy, because if you depend only on the propagules, it's somehow it's seasonal or during fruiting season where you can find the Rhizopora species. And for other species, of course, I know the api-api, the pagatbatis, and the tangal, they have a very small seeds. You know? So it's, the technology in terms of nursery production for mangrove is not that popular because it's not really easy. But I guess, but I hope that I know that there are other people's organizations who also tried propagating other species other than other mangrove species other than the mangrove. So next slide, please. So this is a established mangrove plantation. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but probably this is in, I don't know if it's within the SBM CHEA or outside in Macabebe, but you can see the prop roots of the Rhizopora species. I think this is, I don't know if it's babae or lalaki, the macronata or apiculata. But it's just the same. These are usually the one planted, especially in mudflats areas. Next slide. So another picture. It's in this is in Consuelo, Macabebe, by the way, 105 hectares. I've seen the place. We planted along the river, the banks of the fish pond and along river, Pampanga River, and we're planting mangrove. Next slide. This is a project in Bulacus and in Masantol. Also, I've seen the place. I'm not exactly sure if the 105 hectares are still in good condition now, because I believe this has been turned over to the whole government for maintenance and protection. But we also been doing some inspection, monitoring on the status of the plantation as of even this time. So you can see, it's really, the purpose of the mangrove is really to stabilize the banks of the river and also the existing fish ponds. Well, we know that for a fact that for the municipalities of Macabebe, Masantol, and even Goagua, and even Sasmuan and Lubao, fish pond, inland fisheries is one of the major livelihood of the people, of the residents. So next slide, please. So I just would like to show what I've shown in the early slides is the initiative being unfunded by the National Greening Program, and this one not that big, but a little smaller. But this is funded by the Manila Bay Rehabilitation Program. So this is started in 2019. I've already been assigned here in the province when we are establishing this and funded by the Manila Bay. And of course, under the leadership of President Duterte and our current Secretary, Roy A. Simatu, where we allocate a little funding for the rehabilitation. So again, we determine the species based on its existing stand. We're not that really that expert. We are mostly foresters in my office in the Penro, so we have a little background on mangrove establishment, and I believe with the cooperation of course in partnership with the local government and the people's organization, the determination of species, of course, was based on the existing site species matching. For obviously, what you can see on the site would be the available species that can be. This is like reintroducing the proper species. So for the year 2019, we established about 30 hectares with equivalent 74,300 different kinds of species of propagules. Again, this is in partnership with the people's organizations in the area. Again, this is sort of alternative livelihood and a little and on the poverty alleviation in the countryside, especially in the rural and areas. So next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I would like to show here is during the anniversary of the Manila Bay. This is in January, first year anniversary of the establishment of the program, Manila Bay Rehabilitation Program, under, of course, being led by our department. We mobilized 1,000 people in Consuelo, Macabebe, where everybody planted. Where here you can see the beauty fire protection. We have a very big contingent also from the Philippine National Police, the different LGUs, DILG, of course the academe, the schools, universities, and of course the DENR in full force, and other sector who went to Consuelo in the very early morning of January to celebrate the 1 year anniversary with the Manila Bay Day of Manila. So next slide. You can see here, I think I was part of the picture planting mangrove. With barangay chairman yata ito ng Consuelo. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a local government officials. So you can see we're planting a mud flats. As to is it really a good site for planting? I could say yes, because this is a mud flat area. So I believe that the planting mangrove is suitable in this particular area. So next slide, please. So we're trying to show here newly planted, mangrove. It's in mud flat again. The important thing, based on experience, that the land should be, during low tide, should have been clear of water, and during high tide, it's with water. Don't worry, we are trying to always monitor the survival of the species, because the DENR were very strict. Before the partner PO or LGU can turn over the project, it should be at least 80% survival, or else they will not be paid the retention payment. So next slide, please. 10 hectares, and another is the 12.65 hectares. As you can see, there's a good alternative livelihood for the community. You can see this is community trying to put in a plastic bag the propagule so that they could plant it anytime. when the weather probably is very clear. You can see this is our program has an impact on the community. This is 12.65 hectares in Sasmuan. So next slide, please. So this is in Guagua. We have that much area because they're not really a coastal municipality, but they're planting it along riverbanks. The mangrove. So you cannot see a typical mangrove plantation where you can see in mangroves in the proper spacing. Example 2 by 2, 1 by 1. You can see here is a patches of mangrove planting along the riverbanks, and the riverbanks are usually a mix of salt and fresh water where the mangrove can also thrive. So next slide, please. So based on record, even I'm not still in Pampanga, I could see that there was a mangrove assessment conducted. This is in SBM CHEA. This has been funded by DENR. I don't know if it's in Manila Bay funded program. So we did a mangrove assessment. I think the data is still with the DENR and the local government and other partner organizations. We have a distribution of the different species. Of course, the Soneracha alba is the number one. Of course, these are usually on the front line of the zonation pattern of the mangrove and other species, associated species of mangrove. But I quite wonder why Rhizopora is not really dominant, but I could see from the picture earlier, especially on the top view, that most of those protruding mangrove are mostly Rhizopora species and also bungalon and api-api species, the Soneracha species. So next slide, please. These are the issues and concerns that right now we are trying also to monitor at the same time address, of course, not a bit in one time, because it's really a very big problem because it's an accumulation of problem for so many years. And I just would like to mention to you some of the major issues and concerns that the DENR is now trying to monitor, at the same time document and take appropriate actions based on our capability at this point in time, depending on the logistics that we have. Of course, we're doing it, of course, in collaboration with the local government, from the municipality to the provincial, as well as the Manila Bay, what do you call that? All the partner agencies, the Mandamus agencies, the other Mandamus agencies from the Manila Bay region. So next slide, please. Can we make it a little faster? It's already. So of course, pollution from solid waste, liquid waste, a different kind of waste. Of course, very obvious is the unregulated, not so orderly disposal of solid waste along river banks, along the river, the coastal area. So these are all draining to Manila Bay region, especially Sasmuan, was the recipient of all these waste coming from as far as Guagua, was on the upper part. Of course, the improper liquid waste disposal, you can see a shanty here of an informal settler family directly discharging their waste to the river, to the sea. Okay, waste from the industry, from the fish pond also, who's also been releasing unutilized feeds from the fish pond areas. And also the piggery, poultry, who have for some of the families who are raising domestic animals. They also don't have any sewage treatment facility or also even septic tank to dislodge their waste. So another slide, please. Slide. Next slide, please. Jason. Oh, of course. As I'm related to the first slide, of course, the formal set of families. On, on the left, also illegal peace funds. And I presume that not all the peace funds are legal because I've been talking to, for the case of Sasmuan, with a lot of discussion with Mayor Nardo Velasco about the issue on the proliferation of peace funds. Some of the operators, he doesn't even know. And as far as the status of the land where the peace fund has been developed is also not clear. So I suppose, and also absence of permit from the regulatory agency, which is the BFAR. So this is the issue that also contributory to somehow the issue on the what's the status of the coastal area now in Sasmuan and the nearby two municipalities. Of course, the informal settlers, you can see there's so many. We're in Manila Bay program, the DNR with other Mandamus agency are doing the inventory of informal settler families because in the next phase of the Manila Bay program, uh, that would be the relocation into another area of these informal settler families. That's why currently we are doing the delineation on the ground on the extent of the residential houses or homes that's being built protruding in the riverbanks and even in the coastal areas. An example here, as you can see, obviously they're already protruding in the water portion. So next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, small scale quarrying. I have it included because of course, some of the materials being used in construct locally, they source it from the river. Somehow also adding to the problem, because if these are unregulated, this is also have an impact on the coastal water of the different municipalities. That also causes the erosion of the riverbank. So next slide, please. Next slide. So mangrove degradation, of course. Although I think for in the case of Pampanga, unlike in other provinces that I've been assigned to, it's not much people are more aware that mangrove are really banned in terms of cutting. The DNR has not been issuing any permit as far as the utilization of mangrove. And it's really very hard for an area to be developed for the DNR to approve a cutting permit for mangrove. We usually recommend bowling, but that's not really that really scientifically proven to be an effective way to bowl a mangrove. Pero just to probably a way of if that's really balancing between development and conservation. Of course, everybody's been familiar with the case in Bulacan, where portion of the mangrove is in part of the affected by the development. But in the case of Pampanga, there's not much report to us on the large-scale cutting. What we have in Pampanga is probably the one they're using as fence, local fence, or some firewood, a little consumption for the different houses, but it's not really alarming, it's not really commercial scale. So we are just would like to intensify the IEC so that people will be aware on the importance of mangrove in the whole ecosystem. So Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. So siltation and illegal dredging. Of course, it's quite obvious that the Pasak, even the Guagua, even other the major river system in Pampanga are already polluted due to different reasons, various reasons. First, solid waste, in particular in the Guagua Sasmuan area where commercial activities has been on a higher level. Even in Guagua, where it is somehow a commercialized town already, municipality, first class commercialized. It also been a friend and a partner to Mayor Dante Torres. In fact, this is our epicenter of our program, Manila Bay, because this is where a lot of informal settlers also were situated along the Guagua Pasak River. This is also where we started closing down of their abattoir, their as you can see the place where they trying to, I forgot the exact we're trying to keep the pigs and the cow then just throw the waste in the straight to the river. We close it down with the ENB and the DENR PENRO. So legal dredging, because there are two dredging. One is the legal one with the corresponding environmental compliance certificate with measures, and the other one being done without any permits. That's illegal because there's not proper environmental protections in place or mitigations. So next slide. Next. Conversion of mangrove. Of course, that's obvious. You can see there are a lot of fish ponds, and I think a bigger portion of Sasmuan, in fact, is a fish pond area. I don't know exactly the ratio, and Jason is very, very much familiar to the ratio on total area, the fish pond and the land area. So of course, obvious that previously, probably if you check on the records on the SAT data in the 70s, even in the 60s, 70s, probably you could see this mangrove area as former mangrove area, these fish pond areas as former mangrove areas. But somehow these are not illegal because based on the classification of the lands in previously, the government is also pushing for food security. That's why there are mangrove areas reserved for fish pond development. So this is where the conflict of the policy also has some impact on what's the proper development that is suitable on the area. So next slide. Next slide. Oh, thank you Thank you. Again, I started with our icon, the Sasmuan Bakong Malapad critical habitat and ecotourism area. I also ended with the icon SBM chair. And this is just an advance information and also for the information of everyone. Since I was assigned here in Pampanga a little 2 years ago, we already started closely coordinating, working with the local government of Sasmuan and other agency for really pushing for the conservation and development of SBM Chea, and also not forgetting its ecotourism potential. In fact, I have a long collaboration with the local government of Sasmuan, headed by Mayor Nardo Velasco, my friend. And also now we are pushing since early part of 2019 and up to now, we somehow on the last phase of having that SBM Chea to be finally declared as a critical habitat, because we have been we've always been since when we started always calling critical habitat, but for the information of everyone, there was not yet any formal declaration from the DENR of its being a critical habitat. And now we are finally a few months to go. If not for the pandemic, COVID pandemic, probably we are there already celebrating its inauguration as a critical habitat. And as also would like everyone to know that we are also pushing for it to be declared as a Ramsar site. Back-to-back po yan. Ramsar site of international importance, being a migratory area, and also the pristine water to be preserved. So we are closely working hand in hand with the local government of Sasmuan and the provincial government. Finally declare it back-to-back a critical habitat and Ramsar site, and probably pushing. And we also hope that the Secretary of DENR, Roy Sematu, will come over to witness and to be the one to lead the inauguration. Because everything now is so uncertain because of the COVID pandemic. And another thing, we are also working for a project. It's already in the middle, under evaluation now from the BNB for the improvement or repair of our boardwalk, and also the visitor center. I mean the view deck. We are pushing for its improvement so that when we were now allowed to entertain visitors already, we can have a very presentable and very SBM chair. So all of these, we are working now closely with the local government, because we're really planning to develop it and operate it in partnership with the local government. There will be co-management between the DENR and the local government, as well as all the other agencies who really been there already providing their support for the conservation and development of very big mangrove critical habitat ecotourism icon of the province. So in fact, even the former governor, Nanay Pineda, she's really very interested and always been asking me about the situation there. And even the former president, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, is really also planning to also see again the place. But I told them, just wait for it to be again rehabilitated before we even invite them to come. So to all of you, in behalf of the DENR PENRO Pampanga and our DENR Regional Executive Director, Engineer Kit Moreno, and all his staff there at the regional office, is also helping us together with the local government in our effort to continuously conserve, manage, and develop the icon in critical habitat and ecotourism area in the province, which is the SBM Chea of Sasmuan. With that, maraming salamat po sa ating lahat sa inyong pakikinig. At ibinibigay ko na po ang floor sa ating moderator kung ako po ay may magtatanong or mamaya na. Maraming salamat po sa ating lahat. Mabuhay at God bless po. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Penro LAUDEMIR SALAC, for showcasing the initiative of DENR Pampanga and of course the regional office in conserving the mangroves and conserving the coastal community here in Sasmuan and Pampanga province. He shared more of the future projects with the collaboration of different agencies and NGOs being part of the conservation and rehabilitation effort, especially in Manila Bay Area. So we are currently collecting questions. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through a question pane in your attendee control panel throughout the webinar. Okay, I hope the presentation is good, and we can wait for the another speaker to share more valuable information in conserving our mangrove ecosystem. Our next speaker is a senior ecologist at the Nordic Agency for the Ecology and Development in Copenhagen and associate expert of Wetlands International. He worked in most ASEAN countries projects, including participatory management and monitoring of biodiversity and natural resources, identification of protected areas, and waterbirds monitoring. He's also our partner and our friend, birders especially in our area in Sasmuan, Malapit. Of course, in the Philippines, he assisted DENR directly through World Bank and Global Environment Facility. He also assisted the communities and local government in disaster risk reduction, planning, and projects, especially in developing coastal protection, like in Tacloban. So he also are partners in, I've been working with him also in Sustainable Development Master Plan for Manila Bay because I've been attending before the pandemic. He is also a co-founder of the Wild Birds Club of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Arne E. Jensen. Sir Arne.
Hello. Hello. Jason, I can't hear you.
Hello, Arne.
Hello?
Arne, you can go ahead.
Okay.
You're clear.
I could not hear Jason. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me for this very important webinar with a great focus on this unique phenomenon called mangroves that you are so blessed with here in the Philippines. I also would like to thank the previous speaker for his excellent detailed presentation. It was very interesting. Thank you, sir. I will try to divide my presentation into aspects on mangroves that links to disaster risk reduction. The second part of my presentation I could call the new abnormal normal for Pampanga, and that has something to do with what is happening with the landscape over the past 50 years and what may be happening the next 40 years, which has implications for what we are doing also with mangroves. Let me also say here in the beginning of my presentation, Jason mentioned the Manila Bay Sustainable Development Master Plan. It still is alive despite all the difficulties during the COVID. I understand that NIDA, who is the one representing the government, and the Netherlands government is doing everything possible to extend it so it can be finalized, let's say, within the next 5-6 months. So we have a draft, and that also goes in terms of priority of projects and plans and budgets, and all of this, of course, has to be realigned under the new normal with the COVID situation. I'm mentioning it because the master plan, I understand that NIDA, Secretary Simato, has agreed that it has to be linked to the current approaches in restoration and protection by the DENR. I think one is EO 16, and also other of the DENR's plan, not least the National Biodiversity and Strategy Action Plan. I will not talk about the master plan, but I will just pick out two of the objectives, namely protection and restoration of Manila Bay, so it sustainably can deliver a number of services. And without clean water and without different habitats that impacts all the life forms, that being fishes, that being invertebrates, that will not be possible. So it is envisioned by 2040 that is the aim, that the natural habitats, including, and I think this is important in our discussion, that the natural Manila Bay habitats, including intertidal flats. Intertidal flats in Manila Bay is sandbars, mud flats, shell banks, that these together with corals and mangroves shall be doubled in the size, at least 22,000 hectares. And that includes, as a minimum, restoration of 2,700 hectares of mangroves, and importantly, 2,500 hectares of tidal flats. I will come back a little bit later on the details of this. But let me just, as a reminder, remind everyone that it is probably, from an environmental point of view, the most damaged coastal ecosystem in the entire Republic, Manila Bay. You have lost 99, I repeat, 99% of your mangroves. You have lost 80% of your tidal flats. So when we originally, based on science, the new science data, historical had more than 93,000 hectares of natural mangroves going the whole way up to where you have NLEX today. We have around 1,000 hectares of natural mangroves, and of at least 5,000 hectares of tidal flats, the 4,000 hectares is lost. And when you make your new airport, you will lose another 1/3 of the remaining tidal flats. So, having said so, I will try now to move our mangroves into the world of integrated disaster risk reduction, because another target of the master plan is to protect the coastal communities against risk of flooding and under the forecasted extremes that comes with climate change. And again, linked to this, the improvement of livelihood conditions and safety of local people, not least the most poor people. And when I'm saying the most poor people, I am not referring to the fish ponds owners. I'm referring to those that sometimes are called informal settlers, and sometimes they are just settlers that have been in your beautiful, beautiful Pampanga province, which I normally, to my friends, call the Venice of Manila Bay. Can we take the next slide, please? Ms. Visa. Okay. SALAC made a very good presentation on mangroves, so I will be very brief. I checked some sources on mangroves in Manila Bay. Unfortunately, we still need a good science study on the mangrove species from the north of Manila Bay down to the south. To my knowledge, there doesn't exist one. But sourcing the DENR TEEP document, the economics and of ecosystems in Manila Bay, and master thesis is conducted in Pampanga. I conclude there are at least 9 true species of mangroves in your province, and the most abundant ones is, as already mentioned, for example, Pankawan Lalaki, Pongalon, and Pedada. Next slide, please. And here we have 2 more examples of, in the case of important mangroves to discuss when we're discussing disaster risk reduction and the role of mangroves. Next slide, please. So these are what I call the frontliner mangroves. Mangroves that are well anchored in mud, good for blocking storms and strong wave impacts occurring in the shallow coast areas with mud flats. These are, for example, the Sonaraja species and the Avicennia. Next slide, please. So more upstreams, naturally, especially in the river areas, when you travel around, as I have done with my team for many years, you more inland or more upstream will find the Rhizophora, the stiltroot species. And they have a very important role, which is also associated very much to what are we going to do with all the damaged riverbanks, namely that the root system anchors the mud at the base. So when you get the low tide or in between the tides, these root systems can trap silt in the fluvial areas. Next slide, please. So if we look on the left picture, you just see very schematic how the landscape changed from what we call terrestrial forest in a landscape, as for example in Pampanga on the drier areas, it would typically be what we also can call beach forestry species, which are very, very tolerant species that can tolerate drought, flooding, bad, very, very low quality soil, walking over to where you have the high water when you have a high tide, the landward zone of the mangrove empire, so to speak. And in the mid zone, that is where we normally talk about mangroves, because, you know, in the landward zone, actually the landward zone would extend way, way up again towards and lakes, because there is still salt coming in, and salt is one of the ingredients that is characteristic for the mangrove families. So going back to the mid zone with the Rhizophora, or Avicennia sometimes, or the seaward zone with the Sonoratia and the Avicennia, we can jump to the picture on the right side, which summarize some of the benefits of having a mangrove forest system in the area where we live or where you have your livelihood and want to protect something. In summary, it includes that it traps carbon. So the carbon, every time, you know, there's leaves falling down and they keep there, it composts, and it slowly over thousands and thousands of years compost also all the carbon. So it is contributing to reduce the CO2 emission from the atmosphere. This green mangrove value I will not talk about because the time is short. Let me also mention, which is relevant for Pampanga, it protects land against, perhaps not against flooding, but at least the impact of storms. And definitely its filter functions improve the water quality. And least but not last, because the other thing you have lost so terrible is the biodiversity of Manila Bay. Not the floral, not the tree biodiversity, but the other biodiversity linked to different animals, migratory birds, and not least important for livelihood, the fisheries. And the mangrove, a natural mangrove system, a spaced natural mangrove system with several species, produce an awful lot of very important food sources, ranging from, for example, off your coast, you have one of the key nursery areas for migratory sardines. And they're not just popping up there on their own, they're driven in by currents. But we know from BIFA that the coasts, the natural coasts, more or less, of Bulacan and Pampanga is a key source to that. And one of that reasons is simply because you have still some sizable areas which is still intertidal areas. Other aspects of it is, let me see, or I will just mention it later, that you still happens to have about 200,000 water birds coming from the north, staying about 8 to 9 months in Manila Bay. This is probably the largest congregation of water birds in the Philippines. It is probably only a fragment of what there was, because you remember I said you lost 99% of your natural wetlands mangrove habitat, but still you have about 100,000 water birds in midwinter, in January, when we count together with with DNR in the Asian waterfowl census, we can see these huge numbers of birds. But let me just then mention that the habitat that they need is not the mangroves. They survive solely in their life cycle, more or less on the same as local people along the coast does, namely the invertebrates. All the goodies we can find in tidal flats, ranging from bivalves, shells, snails, and other life forms. I will come back to that in our approach, wetlands approach, to how can we knit together a good disaster risk reduction plan. Next slide, please. So some main principles in disaster risk reduction, if we use nature-based solutions, in wetlands we call it building with nature, is to integrate as a principle protection with disaster risk reduction and climate change, to improve the habitats, but certainly also the living conditions, and engage with the most marginalized communities that are at risk. And these are often, as you know better than me, those living in the small built-up areas in your water world of the Pampanga estuary. And the third principle I will come back to is enforcement of policies and plans. So in short, the mangroves is knitted into several solutions, which from a safety point of view includes, if I take it from the bay and up towards NLEX again, to maintain shallow foreshore areas, because they kill some of the energy. If you have a storm or a typhoon, the wave velocity is being reduced when they have to run off the speeds of several kilometers of shallow areas. As I mentioned, to allow tidal flats to boost biodiversity. The production, for example, of tahong and oysters has near collapsed in Manila Bay. I mentioned that of the 5,000 hectares, about 40 years ago, there's only 1,000 hectares left. And these shallow areas with tidal flats, a little bit of water, is where quite a lot of the poorest people had their livelihood, in contrast to those that are better off and have money in the land bank and can invest in making fish ponds and so on. So to allow tidal flats to flourish together with mangroves is a key principle in building with nature. The third thing, logically, is to protect and restore mangrove belts in former mangrove areas. This is a difficult one. I know that DENR very, very much know it's a difficult one, because this has something to do with titling. But it has also, from a future of Pampanga, something to do with the need to create what we call a disaster risk reduction defense zone. Somehow, though it's a political one, those days are gone where you can still have 90,000 hectares of fish ponds. It will be impossible to implement the mandamus. It will be impossible to keep anything if new socioeconomic approaches, and with that, new land use zoning cannot be created. I'm mentioning that because a sister site, a similar site to Manila Bay, it's called the Wetlands, shared between Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark in Northern Europe. They have an integrated coastal zone plan where you, along the coastline, are not allowed to do all kinds of land uses, simply because the coastal belt is set aside for two purposes. It is set aside to reduce risk from disasters. So you will see the coastal zone full of retention dams, wetlands, buffer zones before you meet people. At Manila Bay, you have the fish ponds the whole way out to the coastline. The last focus, as you can read, is restoration of riverbanks and river flows, in particularly because your main rivers have been put into canals. That can be good for something, but it also have some very, very strong impacts on our ecosystem and therefore also on the mangrove community. Next slide, please. I fished out from the NTP executive order the same as the previous gentleman was presenting. And I tried on the right side to formulate, do we have a clear objective in DNR, in disaster risk reduction, relevant mangrove protection and restoration? Because some of them are kind of contradicting each other, but if they are reorganized, they can supplement each other. So we need to ask ourselves, because it is extremely expensive to restore habitats and restore ecosystems. Do we do our mangrove works because we want to secure the coastline? Is it because we think that mangroves can reduce the impacts from storm surges? Or do we do it because we want to secure carbon to mitigate climate changes? Or do we do it just because we feel a little bit sorry for local communities, especially those who are under the poverty threshold below 10,000 pesos income per month? So we give them some economic incentives. Or is it a combination of above? In our approach of Wetlands International, we try to knit it all together based on an integrated plan. Next, please. Ms. Risa? Yes. So let me also highlight, seen from at least the expertise we have in Wetlands International, and those of us that know us know that we always work with the academe, with aside from our own experts, and of course with government and the expertise you find in governments. So for us, a natural mangrove habitat is more than the mangrove forest itself. It is the associated habitats. For example, the non-vegetated tidal flats, I mentioned them before, the sandbars, the mud flats, the shell banks. And quite often, if the water quality is good, it is associated with the seagrass beds and additional more muddy foreshore areas. This is important also because the different mangrove species are very sensitive to the time they're submerged during high tide, to the salinity and wave impacts among other factors. If you look at the picture to the right, which could have been from Pampanga, though it is from Bulacan. This is one of the last about 50 hectares, about 200 hectares of mud flats left. That is all what is left. But you see how the mangroves naturally is making its own zone. In the background, you have very beautiful, very old natural mangroves. And then you have out in the middle of this wetland habitat, you don't have mangroves. So there must be something wrong. And we, in our approach in disaster risk reduction, we try to copy nature, but we don't want to bend nature because there's a high risk that we will fail. I will come back to that one. Next picture, please. This is a summary from the excellent DENR ZSL manual on community-based mangrove rehabilitation. It is much longer. There are 20 principles. I here just tried to summarize or highlight some of the important things, which are the preconditions if we want to restore mangrove habitats. For example, you cannot just plant mangroves along an open coastline. Even that if you had mangroves in the past and they're gone, you need to have some protective structures, including breakwaters and barriers. That is especially required in highly eroded areas. And again, that will be my second part of the presentation. We can discuss that, but please be aware that the water is rising and the land is sinking. So many of your coastal areas, you will need to bring in at least 1.5 meter of sediments to recreate the mudflats before you have a mangrove habitat where you either would see the mangroves expand on their own, or you will do assisted regeneration of mangroves if there are some mangroves near your area. This is very important because in my recent visits to northern Manila Bay, I observe there is a tendency to like to export your sediments. You know, along your coastline, you have a lot of sediments coming out of your river mouth because you put them in canals, so the sediments doesn't settle anymore where you have now your fish ponds, and it comes out in the bay. But this is actually your Yamashita goal, because if your land is sinking, you must have something to mitigate. So number 2 is super important in discussing investment in restoration with mangroves. And then the trivia, which I am not an expert in, and I'm sure that DENR can be a fantastic source of information with all your experiences. The target rehabilitation area should be in an intertidal location, exposed what we call at the neap low tide. Mangroves also breathe, and if you plant them too high or too low, too high, they drown. So the zone where you actually can plant them is rather limited. Then I would like to say number 4 is of high relevance. It is of high relevance if we remember I said there is a need to construct a disaster risk reduction zone, which in many cases may be a conversion of abandoned or underutilized fish ponds back to a buffer zone, which is useful for local people and also for improvement of the natural habitats. And that is the inner abandoned fish ponds. If you imagine you turn your back to Manila Bay and look up towards Sasmuan or the other areas of Pampanga, you have these 10,000s and 10,000s of fish ponds. And it is easier actually to reconstruct original mangroves in some of these inner abandoned fish ponds than it is along the coastline. On the right side, it is also a very, very easier way to assist existing mangroves to regenerate, because you already have, even it can be a little bit destroyed or not so good, you already have a mangrove habitat which is actually producing different seeds and so on. And this is your whitelings bank of the seeds you need if you want to produce a diversified mangrove habitat. And that is in other areas, in other countries, the areas where you normally have an extensive historic deforestation, such as we have in Manila Bay. Let me skip number 2. I think we all know that seafront planting requires that we bow our head for the way ecosystems are, and Sonoratia and Avicennia species are much more tolerant for salt than, for example, the Rhizophora species. That is number 3. And we think that Rhizophora plantations, single plantations, cannot be justified for 2 reasons. One, all studies after Haiyan in Samar and later showed that nearly all Rhizophora plantations died. So they are not typhoon resistant species. There can be many reasons to that, but important lessons learned from Haiyan was that the original mangrove species, they survived. They had no leaves for 6 months and they looked horrible, but they grow up again. Whereas there was a very, 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 very high level of mortality on the plantations. Another reasons why there are problems. You have one issue in Bangkok Malapad, where you had a storm or typhoon that passed through your area, and you had a lot of trees that fall. The reason why trees are falling like domino bricks is they're all the same age, planted at the same time. So if you instead had diversified species planted at different times, the likelihood that a strong typhoon push would knock them all down is less likely. And then I think we can go to the next slide. I hope the presentation is clear. In my screen, it is very clear. This one is an example to try to illustrate to you that disaster risk reduction linked to climate change, especially in areas which is submerged in more and more water, needs another approach. And it is a costly and a lengthy investment. Please read with me that red means breakwaters, green means mangroves, yellow means tidal flats. I have in this example taken out Pasac and Pampanga river mouths, the lower sections. So before we can, and you can see maybe, especially if you look at Pasac, Bangkong Malapat, to the left of the river mouth, the existing mangroves. The rest of the landscape, the upper half, is more or less all converted mangroves into fish ponds. And the lower section is the shallow Manila Bay. So what we are trying to illustrate with this model, so to speak, is that before you do any coastal mangrove planting, you need to make sure that your seedlings are protected. Therefore, if we walk together along the coastline, you can also see we can do some smart recycling. There are kilometers and kilometers of collapsed dikes, former fish pond dikes, mainly made out of stone. So this can be a recycling of what we call breakwaters. The breakwaters will prevent the waves to come in and flush away the seedlings. And it will also create the environment where sediments can settle and recreate or further build up the mudflats. Without the mudflats, you cannot have the mangroves. So the red color here is, again, it's just an example. I made it this morning to you, so you perhaps better understand how we think in integrated building with nature. So the red lines are the breakwaters. Behind the breakwaters are the yellow, which are the existing, or in most cases, mud flats that has to be built up. And here again, you are so lucky because not least DPWH is increasingly draining rivers, but nobody knows where to put the drainage materials. I've been visiting some of the current deposit sites and it's very sad to see. And as I said, it will be even more sad if you sell it to abroad or it all ends up as fill area for reclamation. You need to keep your sediment loads. So that means that once a barrage comes out from the river, there will be a plan worked out with the DNR, for example, and DPWH and the LGUs, that this is the area where I deposit my mud. So you over time at least can create about 1.5 meters of mud, because most of it today is submerged. You can also see that I did not make it all green. Green means mangroves. So where you find the mangrove color legend here is roughly along the riverbanks, but also if you look at the bottom of the picture, to help where you still have the original coastline, where you still have some patches of original mangroves, you can further, provided you had the breakwaters, you can further establish or expand your mangrove belt. But you can see if you look, for example, at Pasac River, Bangkong Malapat, we did not propose to plant the mudflats and Bangkong Malapat, the remaining, with mangroves. We proposed to plant it up, I think it is in the next two barangays, we said, well, there are probably fish ponds there that maybe doesn't are really active. So it's a good time to convert them back to DNR and restore the mangroves there. Around the Bangkong Malapad itself, please remember that just 15, 20 years ago, the entire Bangkong Malapad was a mud flat. And that's why you had the 10,000s and 10,000s of migratory shorebirds. There are still many, many birds, but if you analyze what species are there thriving and what species are there in not good condition, it is very clear if you compare DNR's waterfowl census data from year to year that the migratories from the Siberia that are totally dependent for their food and for their life cycle on mudflats are decreasing. They're decreasing in many of the other countries because all these tidal areas are being converted. So it is probably smart, especially if it should be recommended, which we think is a good idea as a prospect Ramsar site, that you make sure that the critical habitats include also habitats for these migratories, because the criteria for inclusion in mangrove includes a number of indicators. You need to have an X amount of migratory birds because the convention is for protection of migratory birds. Don't misunderstand me, because you have many birds also in your mangroves, but they are local, they're resident, and they're common. So the majority of the water birds you have in Pampanga are the migratories coming from the north, and most of these populations are unfortunately decreasing. It's a long story, and I promise I will not talk more about birds, but I hope, and we can discuss that maybe later, that you understand how we try to link the different building with nature methods, of which the mangroves are very important. Thank you. Next picture. We are talking very much about new normals, and to have a realistic plan, which is both a COVID-19 plan, investment plan, but also as the Manila Bay Sustainable Master Plan is intending, to have a planning which goes at least up to 2040, for the next 20 years or more. We need to see what is actually the normal for the landscape of Northern Manila Bay. This is Professor Roland's excellent recent analysis with his students, where they say that originally Manila Bay had a staggering 93,400 hectares of mangroves. That is the left slide. If you look to the right, we can barely see the small spots. That is what is left today. In the DENR study, and also in a study that I have conducted for Wetlands International and for IUCN Netherlands, we concluded that of natural mangroves, we are discussing maybe about 1,000 hectares. So that is one reality of the landscape we're talking about, including Pampanga. Next slide, please. So why have all this happened? It is essentially happened because of a huge socioeconomic change over time, roughly explained as the conversion to fish ponds. You have the recent satellite picture to the right of what your landscape looks like. And that started in 1977. So those of us or in your family that are old enough can remember how the mangroves were before the big conversions of the mangroves. But the conversion has continued out in the bay, so that the shallow areas and in tidal flat has also become fish ponds in many areas. And that is because there is, as far as I can see, nothing that prevents in the local government code the regulation of municipal waters, including the rivers. So as as people up in Urani once teach me, if I have a good lawyer and I have some money, I can pick my own foreshore areas and make it a fish pond. Just like, for example, the last island up there, Tubu, which also used to be a mudflat. It is now a fish pond out in the middle of the bay. The patches left, and that is what we have, is patches along the rivers, the river mounds, and along the bay in the municipalities of Lubao, Sasmuan, and Macabebe. But how much longer do we have them? Next slide, please. Pampanga is sinking due to land subsidence, over extraction of groundwater, and sea level rise. And we still have not yet seen the full impact of the sea level rise. And together, it severely restricts where mangroves can be restored and survive. The left picture, set of pictures, I think is from Macabebe. It shows already that people are building another house on top of their first house because the land is sinking. And you can also see it on the left where the man is standing on the highway. The house is sinking. The highway is still either elevated or not yet have sunk so much. On the right slide, which is from ECO 2011, you can see a lot of orange and yellow spots. And this is where by satellite technique, you can explore and see and go and swim in the most flooded areas. You have Manila in the bottom to the right, and you have your own provinces up on top to the left. It is not a complete picture, and it's already almost 10 years old, so it looks different, but it gives you an idea on how much the whole landscape has changed and will change. And please remember, mangroves can also drown. Next slide, please. To the right, you can see we just produced this are just the drafts, and maybe it's easier for you if you look at for example, the border between Pampanga and Bulacan, Hagonoy. The small white stipplings is where the coastline were some 60 years ago in 1957. The yellow line shows where the coastline is today. And here we are talking about anywhere from 1.5 to 2 meters of water, average water. You can see one of these single surviving trees out on the bay to the left. This is the context for which we have to consider our mangrove investment and other disaster risk reduction methods. And that is why I showed you the example on making sure you keep your sediment loads, your Yamashita gold, recycle your collapsed fish pond dikes as breakwaters. It is all those three together, the mud, the mangroves, and the breakwater protection, that can create what we all want, a safer environment for local people, a good habitat for mangroves, and a lot of biodiversity, so we have something to eat and something to look at. Next slide. Oh yeah, sorry. Let me just say that the red lines shows where you have most of these 200,000 water birds. And please note that Pasac River Mouse is one of the sites, followed by the Macabebe area, Mazantol Macabebe, the Pampanga River. Together, they have approximately, I can't remember all the numbers, together they have about 50,000 water birds. I say together because each area is too small to survive on its own. So it is the interaction between a network of protected areas for the water birds that actually is a good medicine. If you just protect one of them and the rest will also be converted or disappear, it is not very sustainable, and we can be pretty sure that we will lose many, many more of the migratory water birds. Yes, next slide, please. So it is self-explanatory. I just clicked on Google Earth, and you can see on the left, this is what the landscape. This is actually again in Bulacan, but it will be the same in portions of the coast of your province. So you can see over just 16 years how much land is lost. What you cannot see because of the quality, but if you look at the picture of February 2018, you can see in the middle of all this water, there is a little dark spot. And that little dark spot is the remnants of the original mangrove coastline. Next slide, please. And to the left is another study, which is interesting for Pampanga, because it shows roughly how much land subsidence that you have in your different municipalities. In the center, I mean, there is still much more science work needs to be done, but the picture is there that many areas along the coast and deep inland in Manila Bay is sinking, probably at a minimum of 2.5 up to 5-6 centimeters per year. So over 20 years, in the case of Pampanga, the land subsidence will add another at least 1 meter of water from where we are now, provided there will be no mitigation. And I don't have time in my presentation to discuss, but it is roughly because all your land is sinking because there's too much extracting of groundwater, especially also to fish ponds. And I put it in the context of your natural greening program, an old natural greening program restoration map I found, where the green, that's to the right, suggests that should be planted, which we think is not going to be a wise investment for many reasons, but also because the land is sinking. Your mangroves will drown. Next slide, please. I had the great privilege to, in collaboration with DENR, PMB, and the AFP, the Armed Force of the Philippines, to fly around a couple of days with helicopters. And that was a great advantage because it's so difficult to travel around and see. As you know, when you sit in your boat sailing up and down the rivers, you only see the river dikes. But from the air, it looks different. These are two examples. I think it's about 2 years ago. And I consulted the excellent Philippine mangrove expert, Dr. Georgian Primavera, about what is this I see on this. And Georgian and I think we have a consensus. This is the result when you disconnect existing mangroves from tidal waters. These new dikes constructed around an existing mangrove patch in your province killed the mangroves. To the left, you can see it in a wider perspective. So that's why we are saying it is probably a very, very good investment to strengthen enforcement, protect what you have. Next slide, please. The first presentation gave an excellent picture, and I was so happy to see all the work you're doing with the riverbanks, because that's another problem that we have when we put rivers in canals. A lot of things happens, and it also sometimes is because the draining is wrong. A good draining of a river is V-shaped, where you make sure you take out the sediment loads in the middle of the river to increase the water flow and to allow local traffic with boats up and down. But you refrain from taking away the sediments, the mud flats along the riverbanks, because it keeps the riverbanks. Unfortunately, and that is everywhere in the Philippines and in many other countries, There's no tendency to like to plant anything along the riverbanks. So increasingly the riverbanks collapses and you get more and more problems. So taking off from the department's own administrative order, 50 meters in all mangrove areas fronting bodies of water and 20 meters both sides of the river channels and riverbanks is a very, very, very good and wise investment if you want to restore or maintain mangrove habitats. For example, in Bulacan, you can more or less sail the whole way from the coastline and almost up to Malolos and still sailing in mangroves, though they are only a few meters wide. That is what is left. But the riverine, the gallery mangroves still stands there. And where you have the trees, the riverbanks in general are very stable because of the root system keeps the soil. So this is riverbank restoration is a very smart investment. But please use the original tree species. They have been there for millions of years and are therefore adapted to that unique environment, including Rhizophora mangroves. Next one. This is something where we always have some interesting scientific discussions from and back. We are just saying with published papers, science studies on the survival rates of trying to do afforestation. Afforestation means that you plant an area where there used to be no trees. Afforestation is more expensive than reforestation, rehabilitation. And whether it is the huge investments done by national taxpayers' money or international donors, for example, Germany paid huge amount of money along the coast of Negros Occidental to plant mangroves at sandbars and so on. This is the Ramsar site Novka today. And based on our counting, about 85% of the Rhizophora died. So when we walked in from the coastline in Novka, we met again the fish ponds, and many of those fish ponds were abandoned. But we did not see anyone who liked to walk around and plant mangroves in the abandoned fish ponds. So that's why we are saying, in general, it's a wrong species, a wrong planting site to try to expand mangroves out in exposed coast areas. But a good assisted natural restoration, as you see on the picture to the right, is much, much more likely to be successful. You also see the difference between the two pictures. You see the spacing, because that's another problem. In many areas of the Philippines, the poorest people are what we call gleaners. Every morning they go out and collect the different invertebrates that you find in open spaces between mangroves or on the open tidal flats. But if you put up a dense mangrove forest, no people can walk there, no people can collect anything aside from the biomass, and the diversity of invertebrates, snails, shells, and so on decreases. So that's why I call this slide to the right, good assisted natural restoration, and the one to the left, a wrong species planted in the wrong site. So I will end my presentation here, and thank you for listening. I hope that it was something relevant. My final words will be to plant or not to plant, but if you plant, plant in the right place. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Sir Arne, for the wonderful and valuable inputs today. Webinar, of course, for sharing how and where, and it should be this area to be planted with mangroves. The initial, and you show the status of the Manila Bay. Okay, our next, I think our next presenter is on its preparation. Okay, let's move. We have now a short pickup for the first presentation. The Penro officer, Pampanga, showcase the initiatives of the DENR in conserving the mangrove ecosystem. And afterwards, Arne Jensen showcase and feature the present status of Manila Bay and the history before and you see the changes. And now let's move uh, from the mangroves. We have in mind that these mangroves can talk, so that the human can understand how they feel. Okay, now let's move to our next presentation. Our next speaker is one of the country's youngest and most decorated top finance executives. She is the Senior Vice President and Controller of the PLDT Group and Chief Financial Officer of Smart Communication. She is also the PLDT Group Chief Sustainability Officer. She is the founding chairman of Gabay Guro, one of the country's biggest education advocacy program since 2007. It serves as the company's flagship advocacy project that aims to empower teachers and provide sustainable support to educational institutions nationwide through its 7 core pillars: classroom donation, connectivity, computerization, digital innovation, livelihood project, scholarship, and teachers trainings and teachers tribute. She is the treasurer of the PLDT Smart Foundation. And on the current basis, she is the Chief Financial Officer of the Philippine Disaster Resilient Foundation. And in a number of subsidiaries and affiliates of PLDT in Smart PLDT, she received the award when PLDT won the Prince of Wales UPS International Disaster Relief Award of Business in Community. Above all this, she is a loving wife to Cavite Congressman Revilla. And mother to her precious Robert and Shady. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us meet Miss Shay Cabal-Revilla.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I don't think, can you see me? I can't see myself in the video, but I'll try to share my screen already.
Yeah, we see you, ma'am.
Okay. Is it okay for me to share my screen already?
Yeah. Okay, you can now share your screen, ma'am.
All right, thanks very much. Oh, hold on. Wait, I have to turn on the thing. Sorry. Share computer sound, technical glitch. Okay, because I have videos. So basically, I'm also CFO and Sustainability Officer of PLDT and Smart. In our sustainability canvas, environment is really a core part of our business. It's part of our 7 sustainability pillars. And in our areas of focus, it's actually the heart of our focus on environment. With Planet, we want to protect our planet and the environment through innovation and technology. And we've mapped out the impact also in terms of the UN SDGs. On our environmental efforts, we actually hinge on the fact that we know that now is the time to act, right? And so we have been trying to prioritize climate action as a corporate because we know that the Philippines, next to Japan, is the 2nd most affected country in the world by climate change. And in the last 2 decades, we are actually very consistent in the top 10 of the Global Climate Risk Index as part top 10 of the most affected countries in the world on cyclones and typhoons, etc. And so for us, we've actually launched Gabay Kalikasan. It's a program on various environmental initiatives and awareness. We have four: reforestation, mangroves preservation, marine protection, and peatlands conservation. We love the mangroves, right? The first two presenters ably presented what the mangroves' importance are. And we know that they are the super ecosystem of countries of the tropics and countries like us in the Philippines. And so because of that, we've actually asked our friends like Pops Fernandez to help us in our local awareness campaign in terms of the importance and preservation of our mangroves.
Still amid the COVID-19 pandemic, there is another life-threatening matter that has been going on way before the COVID-19 took place. It is climate change. Climate change is a very serious matter that will affect us globally from health and economic perspective. It is expected to be more difficult and more costly than the current COVID crisis that we're going through. One way to fight climate change is through mangrove preservations. Mangroves are able to trap carbon emissions to mitigate climate change and to fight global warming. They also act as a buffer zone between the land and sea to protect coastal communities from storm surges, tidal waves, and land degradation. As protectors of shorelines, they play an invaluable role as nature's shield against cyclones and ecological disasters. Mangroves also serve as breeding and nursery grounds for a variety of marine life, which serve as a livelihood for millions of people. As a filtration system, they keep much of our salt out of the oceans. Mangroves are extremely important to our own well-being and to the health of our planet. By protecting them, we can help curb the effects of climate change and ensure a better future for our children.
Because she's a Gabay Kalikasan volunteer, she did that for free. So in terms of our project in Sasmuan, we have a partnership with Ericsson. It's actually ongoing right now. It's a collaboration among us with the LGU and the DENR. We've put in some sensors there, looking at things using IoT with the water level, humidity, soil moisture, and soil temperature. It's really basically teaching the plants to speak. This was cited in the GSMA's Global Case for Change. The GSMA is the Global Mobile Operators Association, where they showcased us on how connectivity is transforming lives and helping environmental programs across the world. What we have done was to actually address the challenge, which was the depleting and dwindling mangrove forest cover, which was negatively affecting the coastal communities by exposing it to natural disasters and affecting their livelihood. The solution that we thought about was to collaborate together, SMART and Ericsson, the LGU, and the DNR, with the stakeholders there and the local communities, of course, to have an ICT-enabled solution ensuring the mangroves sapling survival, because that's really, really important. And we put in sensors there to transmit data on how the saplings are doing. The result is an improved sapling survival and an empowered community as well, equipped with the data connectivity and the analytics to be able to learn how to take care of the mangroves better. So this is our infrastructure. It's a little bit technical. This is the Ericsson IoT technical solution together with our smart access and connectivity. These are pictures showing how we put up the sensors in the area. Also, the water and soil installation by the area as well. And this is actually the IoT gateway data logger, which holds the controller for the solar panels and the batteries and stuff. And the solar panels with the rain gauge and the dashboard where everything is actually being looked into and monitored. I will share to you the video that was put up by the GSMA when this project was cited globally.
The mangroves, sometimes described as rainforests of the sea. This incredible ecosystem is one of the most severely threatened on Earth. The mangroves form the habitat for thousands of species, protect the land from damage with their root systems, and trap carbon dioxide, helping to address climate change. But in the last 50 years, 50% of the world's mangrove forests have disappeared, with a continuing decline of 1% each year, as a result of climate change, pollution, deforestation, and other human interference to the natural environment. Mangrove forests play a vital role in the survival of coastal communities. The forest forms a natural bioshield against the elements, whilst the many species of fish are an essential source of food and a cornerstone to building and sustaining the fishing industry here.
So, pagka ang bakawan po natin ay nawala, maaaring manganib ang ating mga pangkabuhayan na nakukuha natin dito. At hindi lang yon, maaaring magkaroon din ng mga pagka nagkaroon ng typhoon dito, yung malalakas na alon na pwedeng sumira sa mga bahay na nakakapoprotekta yung mga bakawan.
Here in the Philippines, reforesting efforts are underway. The Connected Mangroves project by Ericsson and its mobile network partner Smart Communications is changing this.
Well, it has about 36,000 kilometers of coastline, and you can imagine there's a lot of mangrove areas in the country, as well as will be visited by typhoons about 20 times a year, and these mangroves protect the coastlines of the country. So it's very important for the national communities from waves and all those typhoons and other natural disasters, as well as being in the center of
Hello, Ma'am Shay. Hello. Hello, Ma'am Shay. Hello. I think Ma'am Shay is having a technical problem with its connection. Hello, Miss Shay. Okay, I think Miss Shay Cabal-Revilla of SMART and PLDT Communication lost her connection. So one of her topic is the Connected Mangrove project with the collaboration and effort of Sasmuan, Pampanga, the LGU of Sasmuan, Pampanga. Of course, it's a partnership with the Ericsson Philippines. Actually, it's an international company. And of course, the Connected Mangrove and Gabay Kalikasan, which is the ongoing partnership with different LGU in helping conserving our environment, especially the mangrove ecosystem, and of course the peatland. So I think Ms. Shay Cabal-Revilla is having a problem with connection. Maybe we can proceed to our next presenter. Our next presenter is the concurrent representative. Okay, okay. She is the country representative and program manager of Wetlands International Philippines program. She is trained in marine biology in the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and the James Cook University, Australia. She is used to be part of academic institution in the Philippines and Malaysia. She has worked parallel to her academic duties in environmental projects funded by bilateral and multilateral entities in country and in Southeast Asia. She is currently member of the Technical Working Group of Manila-based Sustainable Development Master Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Annadel S. Cabanban. Hello, Ma'am Annadel.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Just wait, I will proceed to your presentation. I just open it first for you. Okay. How are you, Ma'am Annadel?
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Has anyone seen the species that Manila is named after? Do you know that Manila is named after a mangrove species?
Yeah.
You know? very knowledgeable.
Yes.
May nilad.
The nilad.
Nilad, yeah.
Have you seen it? You're
Okay.
lucky if you have seen it. I haven't seen it yet. And one reason why we cannot see it is because a lot of our mangrove forest has been destroyed. And I have seen it in the presentation of Mr. Arne Jensen that it was reported by Dr. Rolion that 93,000 of hectares of mangroves has been destroyed and only 1,000 hectares are left. And this is why very few people have seen the manilad or the mangrove species. And why this is so is because the settlements of people in the past were on beside the rivers, beside coastlines. And why is it so? Because the waterways are our main medium of transportation between islands and along the river. The rivers are the medium of travel. So boats between islands and boats along rivers are the main transportation mode. So now we need to restore our coastline. You've heard the talk of Mr. Jensen and also from Mr. SALAC that the mangrove forests are destroyed and there is replanting. You also saw in the presentation of Mr. Jensen that there is a zonation from the coastline, from near the sea to farther away from the sea. There's a zonation of different species of mangrove species, and there is also a zonation of the different types of mangroves and the substrate. So I'd like to compliment the talk of Mr. SALAC, who talked about mangrove replanting, as well as the talk of Mr. Jensen on the restoration of our coastline. And I hope we can proceed to the next slide. Can we? So the approach which was mentioned earlier is building with nature. Building with nature is a nature-based solution, meaning to say that we use natural forces, natural materials, along with some engineering solution. Why do we do or apply building with nature? Because there is coastal flooding and riverine flooding. There are two pictures here that show there is coastal flooding. The tricycle driver is wading to or driving through coastal water. This is sea water coming from the sea, and then the guy here is standing on an elevated road. The road has been elevated with several materials because the land has subsided. You can see that the house is lower than the road. So when it rains, the water will flow down to the ground, go down to the floor of the house. So there's flooding along the coast. There's also riverine flooding, but I will not talk about that today. So what can we do about this coastal flooding? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Building with nature is, as I mentioned, is a nature-based solution. It is an integration of ecology, engineering, and society. You can see 3 circles here. Between ecology and engineering, there is an overlap of the two circles. The overlap is the area called ecological engineering. Ecological engineering is the use of plants, trees, shrubs to keep erosion, for instance, in place or in check. Between society and engineering, there is benefit from our ecological engineering. This is the restoration of the coastline, for instance. Between ecology and society, if there is building with nature, there is a complete or continuous enjoyment of ecosystem services, such as the provision of food, where you can get shells, fish, and materials for building houses, and so on. Many different, you can even have tourism if the animals, the birds are in good numbers, and you can attract tourists to come in and visit your place, just like we've seen in some parts of the coastline of Manila Bay. The intersection of ecology, engineering, and society is the intersection of building with nature. This is the ecological engineering that gives valuable importance to coastal protection. In short, ecologically valuable coastal protection. So next slide, please. One way is for mangrove restoration. But mangroves are not just actually composed, mangrove forests are not just actually composed of mangrove species. Mangrove forests are actually part of the beach forest, and the beach forest has actually many species. There are what we call mangrove associates. These are species that are found together with mangroves. In this book that is here on the slide, that was prepared by Dr. Jen Primavera and Resurrection Sadaba on beach forest species and mangrove associates in the Philippines. They have found 97 species plus 43 additional species that were found in beach forest. In short, it's very, very diverse. Next slide, please. So I would like to describe the 5 forms of beach forest from seaward to landward. So form 1 is actually composed of creeping herbs and grasses. An example is here on the slide. It shows how the plant is crawling over the sand and or sandy muddy beach, and the flowers and the fruit. And this species is called Ipomea pescapri. It's actually related to our kangkong, the same genus. This is called the beach morning glory. In the local name, the common name is called katong-katong or arodai-dai or lagayray. So I do not know whether there is a local name for in Pampanga, but this is in the Tagalog language. Next slide, please. Beyond the creeping area is form 2, please. Can you go back to form 2? Thank you. Form 2 is a beach crab. This is composed of plants that are hardier. In the previous one was herbaceous. They're not hard. They're crawling. This one is also crawling, but they have a hard structure. And again, you can see the fruits, the flowers, the tree, the leaves. And this one, the common name of this is boto or masboron, bosboron, bokakbok. In English, it's called sea lettuce. Again, it has a function. It holds the ground. Next slide, please. So we're going from the beach, from the beach that was coastline upper into the land. Now this is Form 3, which is composed of beach, woodland, low trees, and everyone should know this. This is Pandanus tectorius. The common name is Pandanus, pandan, or some people would call it Pangalan. I think this is the Pampanga name. So again, this is found in the forest along the beach, and this is also used in some resorts as decorative. They put it as one of the shade areas, and also this decorative plant because it produces these seeds that are colorful, reddish orange. Next slide, please. The next form of forest along sandy beach is the casuarina forest. This is found as the pioneer tree on sandy beaches. Later on, this can be overtaken or planted with other wide-leafed plants. But you've seen this. This is commonly also called the horsetail casuarina or agoho. And I think people should know this is just like a pine tree because you can see the segmented leaves here, and they grow tall and provide shade. Next slide, please. The next beach forest is really on the land side, and it's mixed littoral forest. It's composed of different kinds of trees as well as climbers or vines, palm trees, small trees, and I will give 3 examples for these beach forests. There is this tree, Cerbera odolam, and they have this round fruit and white flower. It's rare here in the Philippines, but they should be found in some parts. Next slide, please. It's sometimes called in India a suicide tree. Now, this one is, excuse me, Cyanometra ramiflora. It's commonly called balitbitan, common, oringa, or ula. You can see that it has this flower, which is sort of like fibrous, and this fruit that is quite gnarled. It forms a big tree. You can see here on it provides shade in a schoolhouse. Next slide, please. And this is Premna, another example, Premna odorata. It is commonly called alagaw or agdaw, and you can see that the fruits are really small. And so these are these are just examples of the many species of beach forest that actually provide protection and medicinal use and many other uses for people. But I just mentioned the fact that they are providing protection and shelter along the coast. There's very little study about these ones because, as I've said, they're lost. But in some parts of the Philippines, the beach forests are still good. And so we need to restore our beach forests. Next slide, please. In addition to restoring mangrove forests, for example, in this slide that I show here, we are piloting the rehabilitation of abandoned fish pond using mangroves because it's in a mangrove forest. We can also restore beach forest and mangrove associates along the coastline to provide protection and maybe different uses, but I will not anymore expound on the uses. That will be another PowerPoint presentation. In 2014, there was actually a Senate bill number 2179. This is for the National Coastal Greenbelt Act, or the restoration of the green belt to provide protection along our coastlines. But I do not know what happened to this. It has never become a law. But even though it's not a law, I think for our protection, for our benefit as people living along the coastline, we need to restore our beach forests and other mangrove species for adaptation to climate change and to address coastal flooding. Next slide, please. For more information, you may check our website, wetlands.org, or the ecoshape.org for the different ways by which we can apply building with nature in different types of ecosystems. Maraming salamat po. Next slide, please. The pictures are from the book, which I scanned from the book of Primavera and Sadaba in 2011. This is a very important book because it provides us the diversity of species of mangrove associates, which we hardly see now.
Thank you, Ma'am Annadel, for introducing us the different species, which species of trees that can be alternative also for protection in the coastal areas. And of course, Sasmuan has also these kinds of trees, species like talisay, Towi, we call it towi. Actually, it's also a species of mangrove. And this will be also a valuable information for us to have an alternate trees to be planted in our coastline and at the beach area. Maybe we can resume now for the previous presentation of Michelle. Is Michelle is in the line now? Michelle of Smart. Michelle Cabral, Cabal, Michelle Cabal-Revilla. Okay, I think Michelle Cabal is not yet with us. So,
I think he has a meeting.
Yeah, I think she proceeds now to her meeting. We will now, okay. So Miss Shea is on the line. Miss Riza. Miss Shea, are you? Okay. I think she's been mute.
Hello. Yeah, I was asking you to unmute me.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I got lost earlier. I was talking. I didn't know I was I was talking by myself. So I'd like to share my video again on our Sasmuan story.
The mangroves, sometimes described as rainforests of the sea. This incredible ecosystem is one of the most severely threatened on Earth. The mangroves form the habitat for thousands of species, protect the land from damage with their root systems, and trap carbon dioxide, helping to address climate change. But in the last 50 years, 50% of the world's mangrove forests have disappeared, with a continuing decline of 1% each year, as a result of climate change, pollution, deforestation, and other human interference to the natural environment. Mangrove forests play a vital role in the survival of coastal communities. The forest forms a natural bioshield against the elements, whilst the many species of fish are an essential source of food and a cornerstone to building and sustaining the fishing industry here.
So, pagka ang bakawan po natin ay nawala, maaaring manganib ang ating mga pangkabuhayan na nakukuha natin dito. At hindi lang yon, maaaring magkaroon din ng mga pagka nagkaroon ng typhoon dito, yung malalakas na alon na pwedeng sumira sa mga bahay na nakakapoprotekta yung mga bakawan.
Here in the Philippines, reforesting efforts are underway. The Connected Mangroves project by Ericsson and its mobile network partner Smart Communications is changing all this.
Well, the Philippines has about 36,000 kilometers of coastline, and you would imagine that there's a lot of mangrove areas in the country, as well as we've been visited by typhoons about 20 times a year, and these mangroves protect the coastlines of the country. So it's very important for protection of communities from waves and all those typhoons and other natural disasters, as well as being in the center of biodiversity, marine biodiversity in the world. The mangroves are the spawning ground for fisheries in the whole of the country.
Connected Mangroves project is about putting sensors in water and land.
The purpose of these sensors was to collect data about the mangrove environment and to learn more about what it would take to increase the survival rate of the mangroves.
Using waterproof solar-powered sensors, critical data is obtained about soil, water, temperature, and humidity, while time-lapse cameras remotely capture real-time footage from the field. All this information is then transmitted to a cloud-based server and shown on a digital dashboard accessible to the local community on any device with an internet connection. Once analyzed, these findings can be used to help preserve the forests, to preserve the agriculture industry, and to guarantee the security of the mangroves. Working together, mobile operators, governments, NGOs, and other partners can create a better future for people and communities. As carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere increase, threatening the long-term survival of humans on this planet, it is reforestation projects like Connected Mangroves that have been hailed as one of the critical solutions to climate change.
So another environmental initiative we have is on reforestation. We have a current partnership with Rainforest and Rainforest Connection and Huawei. It's actually the same IoT technology, but this time using bioacoustic monitoring to sort of intercept illegal loggings. So we actually have 5 sites in Palawan. I think from January to June, we were able to intercept 4 attempts where certain alerts are given to the rangers, the tanods, and the AFP. For our subscribers, we also have a paperless billing campaign. This is our Save Our Forest video. first two initiatives that we shared with you was actually also highlighted and included in the Natural Resource Management report on environmental protection by the GSMA. Another environmental initiative is on marine protection. We have a partnership with the UP Marine Science Institute and the Marine Environment Resource Foundation, where we are covering and rehabilitating 24 marine protected areas around the country. We all know that we are very, very lucky and blessed to have the Philippines as part of the Coral Triangle of the world, and we are even said to be the Amazon of the seas. And our Philippine coral reefs have been the source of medicine for Parkinson's disease, strokes, various cancer cells, etc. And most recently, ziconotide, which is a painkiller that's non-addictive and more potent than morphine. And so right now we have an ongoing development of customizing artificial intelligence solutions per marine protected area in collaboration with one of our subsidiaries, affiliate Multisys and the LGUs and the local communities. So that's us in our signing. And another initiative is peatlands conservation. Peatlands is actually sort of related to mangroves, like they're cousins. They're critical for preserving global biodiversity and helping address climate change. And so we also partner with the DENR. This is the Kaimpugan peatlands. It's actually a wetlands of international importance under the Ramsar Convention. It's part of the list, and we are protecting it. We're also lobbying with Congress. There's a bill that we are helping also to push for peatlands protection. I think early this week or last week, we had a video call with the United Nations Environment Program on this, and we had a lot of sharings, and we also asked for their video from Alec Baldwin for us to be able to show here in the Philippines as well for our local awareness. This is the peatlands conservation awareness campaigns that we're doing with the DENR, and this is the Alec Baldwin video.
Peatlands are crucial to fight climate change. They are large, often forested swamps that can be found all over the world. They matter for the planet because they actually store twice as much carbon as all the world's forests together while covering less than 3% of the land's surface. But peatlands are being degraded and lost at a dramatic pace due to logging, drainage for agriculture, and burning. And when they are destroyed, they release massive amounts of greenhouse gases. And the unique and often endangered plants and animals that they house are lost as well. Peatlands also matter for people because smoke released from peatlands fires is toxic and has the worst impact on the most vulnerable groups, our children and the elderly. We must protect peatlands because peatlands matter.
In terms of our awareness campaigns, we've had climate change awareness in our group, in our organization. That's also our chairman. He's very, very involved. We also have an e-waste management campaign on the proper disposal of cell phones, chargers, accessories, etc. We have a partnership with SM. We have made our recycling bins available in their malls. We also have a single-use plastic ban campaign across all our offices and stores nationwide. And this has been embraced by our employees and supported by our partners as well. We also have environmental murals. If you're familiar with our office in Makati, we've commissioned A.G. Sanyo, a renowned artist. This was actually painted and designed by him, but with the help of our employees and some passers-byers. This is how our walkway looks like right now. And at the back, we also have this iconic vertical mural. During the start of the COVID, we also came out with coloring pages featuring nature, our Gabay Kalikasan designs, similar to Manolo Blahnik, of course, with the shoes, and Mercedes-Benz with their cars. During Earth Day, we also had Earth Day sessions, a musical jam where it sort of had a lot of traction, 17,000 likes, 41,000 all positive comments. in encouraging everyone to protect the planet, and with 9,000 shares. Last Sunday, we also celebrated the World Mangroves Day, and we had our artist Julian, who also did a performance. And I think last June 5, on the World Environment Day, we had the cast, the theater group at the Huling El Bimbo cast, who did Songs for a Changed World. If you have time, you can catch it on Facebook, which was followed on another online concert, Tatsulok, which was to feature love for God, love for planet, and love for country. And this is another video campaign we have to clean the cloud in your emails, in your laptops, and in your phones to save energy.
Up in the cloud, your files fly in and out. While most are needed, some are meant to be deleted, especially the spam you've forgotten about. Up in the cloud, that's where everything goes. And the more you store, the heavier it grows. But the cloud up there, you'll find down here, inside data centers that suck power and spew carbon into the air. But every cloud has a silver lining. As long as you don't stop trying. There's a simple solution that we can turn into a revolution. Like the newsletters you never read. Delete all the files that you don't need.
Thank you, Ms. Shea, for sharing all your cause and campaign. Of course, the flagship of Smart Communication and PLDT. This time, I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to our private partners, Smart Communication and Ericsson's. Of course, PLDT, hopefully, because we heard this project of yours, the conserving the peatland. Actually, the other wetland youth ambassador is in Agusan. The name Miss Ems Ibona, and she's also with us with the Wetlands International, conserving this fragile ecosystem we have. I hope you have with us till the end of the webinar, because there's still a question and answer, and open forum for all the participants with us today. One question just for the participation of all the audience and listeners to us today, that there is a massive massacre of mangroves within the Manila Bay Area, and of course, since you are the wife of Strike Revilla in Cavite, there's an issue with the Pogo issues there, where the reclamation area is in Cavite, and then a huge mangrove forest has been massacred. So since the Smart and PLDT communication have this campaign, so what do you think the initiative of Smart and PLDT could do to mitigate the effect of this so-called massacre? Ma'am Shay? Yushin, maybe ask Shay to unmute. Okay.
There, thank you. We haven't talked about that, but I will ask you. I will ask him. He's actually here later. So message me all the details. I will not let him eat dinner or let him sleep later if that's the case. In terms of the one that I mentioned on the bill for peatlands protection, I had him sponsor that. I've seen the draft already, which was also seen by the DENR, and I can send you a copy. Thank you for letting me know about the mangroves. We don't really fight anymore, but maybe this one will be a fight tonight. Thank you. I will discuss with him.
Yeah, sure, Michelle. I think it's not just only with the Cavite, and of course, this is a general issue within the Manila Bay area.
I think what we need to do is to have a dialogue with the LGUs, the local executives there, because if they hear about all these things that we're talking about, I think they will change their minds about giving permits to these entities left and right? Because sometimes maybe they are not aware. I'm not sure. And the reason why we are doing this is because we know, right? And we're pushing all of these things as initiatives because we know how important the mangroves are in terms of, protecting our environment and the climate change, global warming, and how it affects everyone. Because with the rising sea levels in the coastal areas, most of their constituents will actually be displaced. Yeah. So they have to know all these things. If they don't, then they will have, wrong decisions. They will not be guided accordingly. So I think one of our initiatives will be to make them aware of the impact of their decisions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Ma'am Shay, Cabal-Revilla, SMART, and PLDT. And of course, I would like to thank also Ericsson. And ma'am, I also thank you for giving us the giveaways, prizes for actually we have gains right after the webinar. It's just exclusive for the Pampanga area to have this freebies, okay, for you. So to all the FB listeners and watchers live stream now, especially from Pampanga, please do watch and our live stream later for our interactive games. Okay, thank you, Ma'am Shay, and have a good day.
Thank you, Jason.
Sir Sonjay, I think there's still one more question for Ms. Shay.
Okay, you can do so, Ms. Riza.
Okay, I'll read here. It says that question for Smart and Ericsson, are they looking at expanding connected mangroves across the country? And what are the priority areas, if ever? How does one become a part of the initiative?
Yes, the answer is yes. I think we are looking at certain areas in Sorsogon, but we will be happy to partner with you. Just send us a note or something and we will be happy to discuss with you.
Thank you, Ma'am Shay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I think we will now proceed to our next speaker, to our partners, Academe. They are waiting. Our next speaker is an Academic Achievement Awardee in Sesame Top PhD graduate, Doctor of Philosophy and Environment Science, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He works a faculty at Natural Science College of Arts and Sciences in Pampanga State Agricultural University. He is now an assistant professor and designated as a center director of PSAU Tamarind Research and Development Extension Center. In 2019, he finished his PhD in Environmental Science, cognate in Wildlife Studies and specialization in Environment Management at the School of Environmental Science and Management at the University of Los Baños. His research interests are in the field of biodiversity conservation, resilience, and environmental management. And of course, our next speaker is also familiar to you because he is also a presenter before in the EAF, and the East Asian Australasian Flyway Convention held in Bacolod. So without further ado, let's welcome Gerald, Dr. Gerald M. Salas. Sir? Sir Gerald?
Yeah, thank you.
Sir Gerald.
Okay. Good afternoon to each and everyone. So thank you to the municipality of Sasmuan for inviting me as one of the resource speakers for today's webinar. I'll be talking about if the previous presenters focus on the mangroves, but in my presentation I'll be focusing on how we can explore the socio-ecological resilience of Sasmuan, Bangkong Malapad critical habitat and ecotourism area. So I think first we need to define what is resilience. So resilience is an important characteristic of an ecosystem that enables the system to absorb disturbance, reorganize while undergoing change, retaining its function, structure, identity, and feedbacks. This is actually a term introduced by Holling in 1973. And resilience, in layman's term, it is the ability of a system to bounce back upon a perturbation or upon a disturbance. So it means what I'm trying to say now is we would like to look the Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad as how its ability to bounce back just in case there are some disturbances in the future. Now, the most dominant ecosystem in Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad critical habitat and ecotourism area is actually the mangrove ecosystems. However, aside from looking the mangrove ecosystem as an ecosystem, we have to look the mangrove ecosystem as a socio-ecological system. It means we have to involve the people in understanding the resilience of the area. So, of course, we have the ecosystem, that is the biodiversity, the water, and the land that is part of the area. And this ecosystem, as we all know, it provides different ecosystem services. So we have the provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural. So I listed down few of the ecosystem services that the Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad may provide. So we have here source of food, agriculture and fisheries, coastal protection, water filtration, supporting services. It provides a habitat to a lot of biodiversity, to different species, and lastly we have cultural, more focus on the ecotourism. Now, of course, everything is being utilized. These ecosystem services are utilized by the social system. So these are the people involved in the system. So also in the social system, we have the economy, the values, the knowledge, the technology, the institutions, and the infrastructures present in the area. So then, it means there are anthropogenic activities happening in the area. Now, in looking into the resilience of the area, there must be a co-adaptation between the ecosystem or the SMBCHEA and the social system. Therefore, we can look into now the resilience of the critical habitat. However, of course, there are some external drivers or externalities present. Of course, let's say lack of access to international markets, land use change, and other coastal development. Now, one model that I've used actually in my dissertation, which focused on Candaba wetlands, that I think we can probably explore or use in assessing the resilience of the area is the socio-ecological production landscape and seascape. So this is a model used model developed by the United Nations Institute of Advanced Sustainability. So it is a model that refers to the mosaic production landscape that has been formed by the human-nature interaction that sustains the human well-being while maintaining the ecosystem services. So this model actually links the biological, the physical, the social components, which are manifested, of course, with the traditional or local knowledge that is present in the area and the sustainable use of the biodiversity. Now, the socio-ecological production landscape and seascapes, it actually shows the interconnectivity of the landscape to the seascape. So it has four components. We have the ecosystem protection and maintenance of biodiversity. This includes the diversity of species and interactions that reflects the ecosystem health. Then we also have the agricultural biodiversity. In this context, when we speak of agriculture, it also includes the fisheries sector. So the agricultural biodiversity, it is actually the nexus between the ecosystem, ecosystem health and the community. Then next we have the knowledge, learning, and innovation. So it is the resilience of the community is strengthened by, of course, the learning systems, the different knowledge systems present in the area. And another important factor is the social equity and infrastructure. So, of course, the resilience is very reliant on the availability of access to functioning social infrastructures. So I have listed down here several indicators that we can look into in each factor. So for the ecosystem protection and maintenance of biodiversity, of course, we have to look into the flora and fauna of the mangrove ecosystem, how heterogeneous and how heterogeneous the area is. If there is an area allotted or area designated as a protected already, and the rate of recovery from extreme environmental climate change related stresses or shocks, example, typhoons. Now, for agricultural biodiversity, we have to assess the maintenance of the agricultural biodiversity, how diverse the fisheries or the fish that may be thriving in the area, and the documentation and conservation of agricultural biodiversity. If there is an innovation undergoing or in agricultural biodiversity management, and if there is an access and exchange of agricultural biodiversity. Now, on the social aspect, so is there a transmission of local knowledge? We have to recognize that the local knowledge is very important in any conservation endeavor. So we have to look into if there is an intergenerational transmission of local knowledge. So are there cultural activities related to the biodiversity present in the area? Is the knowledge documented and actually exchanged? Are there still is the use of local terminology still present in the area? Are there any practice of traditional healing methods? And of course, how about the food diversity and the system in the area? It's also a factor because we obtain food from the ecosystem. Then social equity and infrastructure, the last. So we have here how dependent the community into the natural resources present in the area. Is there any local resource governance? How about gender equality? Is there a clear ownership or autonomy in relation to the land and resource management, the presence of social infrastructures? Is there any access to healthcare? Is there a livelihood diversity? Is there access to credit and loans? Is there a local disaster management plan present? Of course, is there also an ecotourism plan? So these actually are the indicators on how we can assess the socio-ecological resilience of the SMBCHEA that we can include in actually developing the conservation and management plan of the habitat. Now, in Pampanga State Agricultural University, we are working on biodiversity assessment. So these are my students. When we visited SMB Chea last year, I think around October, this is part of their activity in their ecology class. So we consider as SMB Chea as an educational hub. And this is also actually my first time visiting the area. Then what I would like to impart is that we must look the Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad critical habitat and ecotourism area not just an ecosystem but as a socio-ecological system, because we have to involve actually the community in the assessment, and so that we can have a comprehensive overview or comprehensive assessment how resilient the area is. And that is necessary for us to have a sustainable and integrated coastal management plan in the area. So this is actually a photo I asked from Mr. Nathaniel Supan when they had, I think, the mangrove planting way back in 2014, around 2014, 2015. So I think that's the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening. Sir Jason.
Thank you, Sir Gerald, for the wonderful presentation we have today. You share the other use, or what we call it, to be the educational hub of Pampanga when it comes to research. Of course, we have also different universities from Manila, and we have partners also our university here in Pampanga, and have their research. Actually, I welcome all university to have their research in the area, because it helps a lot when it comes with this study. Okay. Thank you, Sir Gerald. We will proceed now to our next speaker. For 14 years, she's a biology professor and currently assistant professor in the Faculty of Biological Science Department under the College of Arts and Sciences in Angeles University Foundation. A mother and a certified plantita. So you call it plantita because you love plants. So that's a term for a woman or a lady love to plant. Okay, so let's meet our plantita for today. Let's meet Miss Emily Ann Mallow. Ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I would like to thank LGU Sasmuan for inviting us, the Angeles University Foundation, to be part of this celebration of the World Mangrove Day. Okay, so a while ago, Ma'am Annadel has mentioned about the beach associates, the beach forest associates. So we in Angeles University Foundation have worked on the riparian vegetation. So along the Guagua River. So from Bangkong Mapalad up to the Duck Island, which also includes mangrove associates, so such as the Dampalit, and then we also have Neem, Talisay, Banago, which is endemic in the Philippines, and many more. So mangrove associates, or the beach vegetation, plays an important role in protecting our coastal area, okay, our coastal community. So it provides the first line of defense from the threats of the tsunami and high tide by reducing the strength or force of waves that strike them. Okay. Sir Jay, may I request po yung aking presentation?
I'll be sharing.
Okay, so most of the presentation that I will be sharing were already mentioned by the speaker prior my presentation. Okay, so that's our picture when we went to the SBM Shea. Okay, so so we have the Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad or Bangkong Mapalad Critical Habitat Ecotourism Area. So it is located in Sasmuan. So Sasmuan is a coastal municipality in the province of Pampanga. So if you're going to look at the geography of Sasmuan, it is peculiar in that it is surrounded by fish ponds, and also aquaculture was the principal industry driving the local economy. So they actually, the local community get their livelihood from the Guagua River, okay, and also from the SBMJ as well. So without the presence of mangroves, especially those mangroves that are found in the SBMJ, so the town of Sasmuan could be vulnerable to huge waves as well as floods that are brought by typhoons that could lead to the devastation of the communities and their livelihood, especially on the coastal areas. So later, we're going to talk more on how this mangrove has protected the town of Sasmuan. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we've been talking about mangrove. Okay, so but what is mangrove? So mangrove is a type of forest growing along the tidal mudflats and along shallow water coastal areas, running inland along rivers, streams, and tributaries where the water is usually brackish. So mangrove is one of the most productive ecosystem and natural renewable resource. Okay, next slide. So these are the common mangroves of SBM Chea. So I got the information from Sir Jason. So these are the list of mangroves that we can find in Bangkong Mapalad. So we have the Rhizophora stylosan, Rhizophora mucronata, Avicennia marita, and then we have the Soneracha alba and also the Soneracha cassiolaris. So out of 54 species of mangroves around the world and also 60 mangrove associates. So in the Philippines, we have around 47 true mangroves and belonging to 26 families. Okay, next slide. So this is Avicennia marina. Okay, so this belongs to the family Acanthaceae. So its main use is that the wood is used for pole or in the house building and also for charcoal, piles, mine, timber, fire. So the bark of Avicennia marina was formerly utilized commercially for tanning from the other countries. And then the tree is very useful for preventing coastal erosion and also as windbreak. And for the biodiversity, honeybees collect nectar from the flowers of the Avicennia marina. So the resin from the bark is also used to treat snake bites and also to remove placenta after birth. So in Madagascar, so a leaf decoction has been used as antidote after eating poisoned fish, whereas the leaf and the bark decoction are applied against scabies. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So this is another mangrove that we can find. So we have the Bakawan babae or the Rhizophora mucronata. Okay, so same is true with the Avicennia. So it is used for the production of charcoals and then piles, mine timbers, firewood, flooring, cabinets, cabinet works, furnitures, house posts, tool handles, tannins in barks, and then steel roots used for small boat anchor. Okay, next. Okay, so another is the bakawan or the bakaw. So this is the Rhizophora stylosa. Okay. So it is also used for firewood, charcoal, and then it's also used for ship planning posts. And then we have piles for bridge and also wharf construction material, cabinet works, tannin, leaves to goats and cattle. So they use it as fodders. And then the pneumatophores used as float for fish nets, and then manufacture of the soles for the shoes. Okay, it is also substitute for cork, and then the food is eaten raw or cooked, fermented to control hemorrhage. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then we have, okay, so we have the Soneracha casialaris. This is also known as pedada. So same is true with the Rhizophora stylosa. So they make use of the bark as for firewood, charcoal, okay, and a lot more. Okay, next is the pagatpat or the Soneracha alba. Okay, so this is the only picture that I have among the 5 species. Okay, so it is used for firewood as well, and then charcoal, ship planning. So the same is true with the other species. This is the most dominant of mangrove in SBM Chea, like what was presented a while ago, wherein there are 50.21% in 2017 as presented by PENRO SALAC. Okay. So let's now proceed to the mangrove's ecological function and social benefits. So mangrove protects the coastal areas as well as the communities. So mangroves act as buffer zones to protect the coastal communities from the natural disasters and also with the risk of the flooding. So as per Sir Jensen. Okay, so in 2014, so the provinces of Pampanga and Bataan were widely affected. So they suffered from the strong winds that is whipped up by the Typhoon Glenda. But because of the presence of the mangrove in the area, so they were able to protect. So the mangroves has protected 285 families at the Barangay Batang Dos in Sasmuan town. Okay, next. So mangrove also absorb organic pollutants and also carbon dioxide and convert it into organic biomass. So through mangrove, the mangrove make up only 0.7% of the world's forest. However, they have the potential to store about 2.5 times much carbon dioxide as human produce globally each year. So the mangrove forests play a profound role in reducing the ambient carbon dioxide levels as they sequester 20 to 100 times more carbon per year unit area than the croplands. So trees absorb the atmospheric carbon dioxide for the growth of the woody biomass and increase the soil organic carbon content in the soil. And then it also traps sediments and build land promoting deposition and accretion. So mangrove provide a distinctive mechanism of trapping sediments and accelerating the land building processes in the tide-dominant coastal and estuarine environment. So the complex hydrodynamic and salinity condition, as well as the accumulation rates of both organic and inorganic sediments, primary surface elevation, and hydroperiod influence sediments retention mechanism with the mangrove ecosystem. So there's an abundant terrigenous sediment supply that can form dynamic mud banks. And the complex aerial root system of the mangrove may lead to the accretion of the sediment by weakening the tidal velocity. So such mechanisms are often enhanced by the organic flocculation. And the next. So we have here, so 1 hectare of mangrove trees produce annual litter fall of up to 3.6 tons, and 1 hectare of healthy mangrove habitat produces 1.08 tons of fish and fishery products annually. Okay, next, sir. Next slide, sir. Okay, so produce, like what I have mentioned a while ago, it produced approximately 3.65 tons of litter and detritus per hectare per year. So the litter produced in the mangrove forest includes the vegetative as well as the reproductive part of the plants, which forms a primary source of organic biomass. So this is available as a food to a wide variety of commercially important detritus feeding organisms inhabiting the mangrove forest. So it's like a cycle. So when the leaves fall, so they are broken up into pieces by the crabs and then they decompose. So in the process of decomposition, so the leaf particles are coated by the bacteria and then become detritus, which are highly nutritious food for many organisms. So some of the animals that eat detritus are the zooplanktons, shrimps, fishes, oysters, and crabs. And then any detritus that remain undigested is excreted and returned to the detritus pool. Okay, so the surplus detritus may be eaten up by the other feeders or exported to the open ocean and other neighboring ecosystems. So this process is repeated many times over until the detritus is fully decomposed. So one leaf, so meaning one leaf is already enough to sustain one fish in its stay in the mangrove, so during the juvenile stage. So the juvenile fishes then move out to the seagrass beds and coral reefs or open ocean when they are mature. So in short, so a hectare of mangrove produces up to 3.6 liter fall per year per hectare, thus providing a lot of food for marine life. Okay, so that's why for every hectare of mangrove destroyed, so we lose around 1.08 tons of fish per year per hectare. So this is a good reason for us to save the bakawan or the mangroves. Next. Okay, so another is to promote equity. So like what Dr. Salas has mentioned, so there must be a socio-ecological system. So wherein we should let the local be involved in protecting the biodiversity of the SBM CHEA. So it is on how dependent the local to their natural environment and resources. So if you're going to take a look at this one, so we have the social responsibility wherein they're planting mangroves, and then we're going to take a look at the picture on the lower center part. Okay, so that's the bunbun wherein the stem cuttings are used as artificial reef for culturing tahong as well as snails and tiger shrimps. Okay, so this is for their livelihood. Okay, next. Okay, of course, the mangrove, okay, it also provide recreation and educational. So just like what you have mentioned, just like what Dr. Salas has mentioned a while ago. So we in Angeles University Foundation have a great privilege to collaborate with the LGU Sasmuan. So these are just 4 of many of our students who have graduated because of our collaboration with the SBM CHEA. So they have worked on the biodiversity and ecological survey, so which includes the study of the vertebrates as well as invertebrates, the microbiology. So we have worked on riparian vegetation as well. So aside from recreation and educational, it could also serve as, of course, the opportunity. So the SBM CHEA or the mangrove forest opens opportunities for collaboration that will address the dearth of information. So the gathered information from the researchers, so they can be used to be better protect and manage the area. Okay, next. Okay, so this is my concluding statement. So we need a healthy environment in this time of pandemic. For that, we need our mangrove ecosystem to achieve that. Okay, so aside from the opportunities that I have mentioned a while ago, so environmental health is critical in this period of pandemic. So like in order for us to prevent the future pandemics, so we must protect all of our ecosystems. That includes the mangrove ecosystem, especially the wetlands that have functions in the global ecosystem. Okay, thank you for listening. Okay, thank you, sir. So these were my references. Okay, so we have BFAR, the DENR, and also, yeah, so those were my references. Dr. Malabrigo, so I've used 4 of his photos for the 4 species of mangroves, because I only have 1. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ma'am Emily, for sharing with us and introduce the present species right now with the assessment, with the mangrove assessment we have. Actually, it's a 10 species recorded, and then we have you feature the 5 and the most dominant, the Soneracha. Okay, ma'am, thank you very much. I hope you are still with us until the end of the webinar. Okay, before we go to the question and answer, let me have a short recap of all the presentation. Presentation of PENRO, Officer LAUDEMIR SALAC, the status of mangrove conservation, rehabilitation and management in the province of Pampanga, sharing with us the collaborative effort, the initiative they have with the mangrove conservation in the province of Pampanga. Presentation of Mr. Arne Jensen, the role of mangroves in disaster risk reduction in Pampanga Delta, highlighted the status of Manila Bay before and at the present time, which is evidently seen in the Google time lapse, as you have seen the features of the mudflats from way and beyond. So and of course, what is the role of the mudflats and the mangroves within the risk reduction. Okay, and then the presentation of Dr. Annadel Cabanban, building with nature is not only mangrove planting. Of course, building with nature is not only mangrove planting, because she introduced with us the alternative trees we have for the mangrove planting. Of course, with this rehabilitation and restoration of the coastline, and having with this to restore the vegetation, we have alternative trees. Presentation of Dr. Gerald Salas, the mangroves of SBM-CHEA, of course, and it's what we call this, the sociological and economic importance of this area in the province, such as he gave this example as the area is an educational hub, especially for research and for the students and colleges in the province. Presentation of Miss Emily Ann C. Malong, the mangroves of SBM-CHEA, highlighted the dominant species of present in Sasmuan, Bangkong, Walapan. Of course, the youth, their uses, okay, and then the last, actually it's not the last presentation, but of course it is the presentation we had with Miss Shay Cabal-Revilla of Smart and Ericsson Smart PLDT with our project Connected Mangroves, their costs with this Gabay Kalikasan, saving our peatlands, and other costs, of course, their projects, initiatives within the Philippines. Okay, so I think we will go now for revealing the poll question, the result of the poll question. You will be see the first question, the result. Do you think your coastal zone is currently at risk? So our result is yes, with the 4, and then we have 4% and no for 1.3, and maybe is 1.4. I don't know 1.1, and I don't care 1.8. So yes, definitely, because we are living in, of course, in Manila Bay area. Next. What do you think is the importance of mangroves in the coastal areas? It seems the highlight word is protection. So most of the answers of our participants and audience right now answered protection. Thank you. And lastly, the next poll question, the last, have you heard about building with nature? So we just asking this one because most of our participants had before attending before the building with nature webinar or seminar before. Right now, I have this result that's yes, and then the second no, and third maybe. So that's it. That's the poll question. So we have now a question and answer. So I hope all of our resource speakers still with us today. Okay, it's a question from Miss Violeta, Violet. Her question is to Penro, Penro SALAC, Pampanga. What's the impact and implication of San Miguel Airport to Pampanga? I think maybe other speakers maybe also like Dr. Annadel and Sir Arne may answer this question. Sir Penro.
Jai, I think he needs to be unmuted. Nakamute si Sir.
Yeah.
Jai.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. I've just seen the presentation. Actually, Jason know that we're not really that privy about the project in Sasmuan, since when I was assigned here, I just happened to know about this project when I visited the area once. But seeing the presentation, I think that's really very relevant, and especially we really need yung real-time monitoring, of certain ecosystems, especially the Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad, wherein it's really a known migratory path of migratory birds, as well as there are so many other organisms that have been that can be seen in that area. I think the project of SMART, indeed I agree that they have to expand it also to some of the critical areas, ecosystem areas in other countries. And it's got good that they started it in Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad critical habitat. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Penro. Another question is from Rizaldi Agpun. Mangrove forest restoration or rehabilitation activities return biodiversity to pre-impact levels. So, do mangrove forest restoration and rehabilitation activities return the biodiversity to pre-impact levels?
So, Joy, can I speak something?
Yes.
Because the previous question by Ms. Villeta was about the impact of San Miguel Airport to Pampanga.
This is
And
short. I thought it's a
yes,
program.
sir.
The script. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay lang, Penro po.
Yeah, just be clarified. I'm sorry, it's about SMART. Yeah, I cannot really comment yet because the location of the San Miguel project, I think that proposed airport is in the province of Bulacan. But I believe that the company has complied with all the requirements. They have the environmental compliance certificate. I believe so. And now they're starting to have their rehabilitation program. And I think the DENR PENRO in Bulacan, as well as the regional office, as well as the other attached agencies such as EMB, were part in the monitoring team in that particular project. And for me, this is where the development vis-a-vis the conservations come in. And for us, the DENR, we really say, not against any development, provided that proper mitigation measures are in place so that there has to be no impact on the different and various environmental ecosystem in that particular. And I believe that when we're talking about Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad, although it's not that far, because it's belong to one, it's just near in that particular. I believe that if the DENR would be vigilant about ensuring that proper environmental protection, as indicated in their environmental monitoring, as well as environment management plan, as indicated in their environmental impact study, shall be followed, then I believe that there will not be that much impact on the environment. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, sir.
That is smart. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Pedro. Ma'am Riza, can we ask also Dr. Cabanban and Sir Arne Jensen the same question as by Ms. Violeta, for they are also with the technical working group working with the Manila Bay Sustainable Master Plan, because I think they have this answer.
Yes, sir. I think they have a lot to say, but I'm not sure if they are still here because they have a Skype meeting at 4:30 p.m. today. So actually, I want to ask the question to you because Penro is from the provincial office and you are the native of Sasmuan. So you are the... Sorry, sir. I want to throw the question to you because ikaw yung taga dyan eh. So, meron po bang sociological or ecosystem impact sa coastal barangays in Sasmuan? Or...
Actually, with the different studies we have here, and then with the help of different partners in research, academe. So we have also we have an ongoing actually a future project, a future studies with the Angeles University Foundation and PSAU with the DENR PENRO, studying the socio-economic and ecosystem services of the area. So with the services of the area, of course, the Sasmuan Bangkong Malapad serve as a fishing ground, and of course a sanctuary, fish sanctuary of the province of Pampanga. And of course, with this project ongoing in Bulacan, with the Aeronopolis project, the airport, maybe there's still an effect. Actually, it's within the ecosystem because there will be a displace, of course, in the marine biodiversity and of course not only in the ecosystem, even our fisher folks in the area will be displaced also. Why? Because I think the airport maybe it's not just too far to us, but the effect is near within the coastal area.
Okay.
I think I deliver and very informative for you to have it. Okay. So
thank you, Sir John Sandra.
okay, Ma'am Risa, of course, if Sir Arne Jensen and Dr. Annadel, they are not with us now. Actually, Ma'am Annadel is answering question during the webinar. So some question in the Zoom chat pane already answered by Dr. Annadel, where I'm addressing now the question before I questioned with Ms. Shea, Smart and Ericsson, but now this one is relatively because it's within the Manila Bay area. SMC, San Miguel Corporation, has started planting 25,000 mangroves on 10,000 hectares of coastal areas in Agolay, Bulacan. The first, the target is 19,000 mangroves to be planted over the 17 hectares Bulacan. Actually, in Central Luzon, will this augment the expected reforestation on the Manila Bay area? I think maybe someone from Dr. Annadel or from the Wetlands International and can answer this.
What's the question, sir?
Of the effort of San Miguel Corporation planting 25,000 mangroves and of all the plantation they have, do you think this initiative will augment the total loss, the mangroves?
Earlier, that was the question was posted in the chat box, and Ma'am Annadel, I think, has responded that as long as they plant the correct species, it will really mitigate the effects. So hopefully, they can really plan and think about it more. So that's her suggestion. As long as the right species are planted in the right places, it will really help. So that's all.
Okay, to all the speakers, I think it's maybe we can address to them. It's from Erlich Anino. Erlich Anino. Is there any study conducted about the sustainability of mangroves species that were planted in the area along with the type of soil? So he's just asking if there is a study species of mangroves that can be planted within any type of soil. Sir Gerald, Salas, do you have any information to share with us, and especially to our Penro, who have these initiatives of planting mangroves within the coastal of Pampanga. So, do we have a study? To our dear partners from academe, do we have study on specific or species of mangroves can be planted to any type of soil? Okay, sir. Okay, you. Okay, sir. Do you have
Okay,
to share with us?
Gerald, Dr. Gerald Salas first.
All right, thank you, Bob. Yeah, with regards to the study on the specific mangrove, I think a suitability assessment for a specific mangrove species. From our end in the university, I believe we don't have yet that kind of study, but we are interested on working on that kind of study. Given we have given the chance that, of course, funding and given the chance to do that.
Thank you, sir. Actually, we will have for our future partnership with this the project ongoing. We will have at least 4 activities right now to accomplish. For actually, the data will be used for Ramsar. So we're looking into it. Okay.
Okay. Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
Well, actually, sa part ng DENR, I mean, based on experience, before we establish a plantation and include mangrove included, we do some survey mapping and planning. But the question is, do we have any study or in determining which a particular mangrove species that are suited to a particular soil type? And I think based on experience and what we're doing in the DENR, we just plant it based on this zonation pattern, or is it landward, midward, or the seaward? The best indicator is what kind of species that has been previously existing in that area. That's why we usually term, according to Dr. Jensen, it's more of we are doing reforestation. So our basis is just what kind of particular species are thriving before we just get some historical data if there's no evidence of what kind of species are there with the plant. Plus also we involve the community, and the community has a knowledge on what particular species of mangrove was there before. And also we investigate the condition at present, because there might be changes in it has previously a mudflat, but now it becomes a silted, or there was already accretion. So these are the determining factor. For me, based on my experience planting mangroves even before, when I was a student, we just use it on what kind of mangrove was there prior to establishment. And there is, as presented by the other presenters, there was a certain type of mangrove species for a type of zone in the mangrove area. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Pero, for answering this question. And I think we have still one question from the live stream SBM Chair page. What are the technical instrument of the SBM Chair for the area? It is managed by the LGU. So I think I can answer that. It is managed by the LGU and of course with DENR. So it is managed by DENR and they are assisting us. Of course, the SBM Chair is in the municipal water area of Sasmuan, Pampanga. Okay, I hope I address the question from our viewers in the live stream. Okay, I think we have go a long way in the mangrove conservation. And if you have questions we get today or think of new questions, please do send the email pioneer registration. We will also mail the answer. Thank you to all our speakers and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, World Mangroves Day 2020, Mangrove for Coastal Defense. Before leaving the webinar, make sure to click the link for the evaluation survey on the presentation and in the webinar today. And we will appreciate if you would complete and that provide your feedback. You will also receive the follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours for your certificates of participation. On behalf of the local government of Sasmuan, Pampanga, to our partners, DENR, Region 3, DENR PENRO Pampanga, to our proactive PENRO, dear PENRO SALAC, Wetlands International Philippines Program, Smart Communication, Ericsson, our partners Academ, Angeles University Foundation, and Pampanga State Agricultural University. To our speakers today, thank you for joining us. And of course, to our dear participants, thank you and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.